Our story begins with our protagonist Zhuang Wu learning to code and design on his own. He didn't have a team and single-handedly designed a game. Tiredly, he leaned back in his chair, assuring himself that in 2 more months he would be done, and his efforts would undoubtedly bring him fortune. Suddenly, his phone rang. It was Ma Chun-chun. He answered the call and Ma demanded to know when he intended to pay his rent. He asked her for a few more days, promising that his game would earn him substantial money by then. Ma reminded him that she had been hearing this for 3 years. Only 10 people had bought his previous game, Doomsday, and the sales of P-Man were even worse, as she was the only buyer. He replied, somewhat sadly, that it was simply because they lacked good taste. Ma retorted that he was the one with poor taste and warned him that if he didn't pay by tomorrow, he should prepare to be evicted. Checking his balance, he found he only had 558 RMB. The sight was frustrating, but he figured if he was thick-skinned enough, Ma wouldn't be able to do much. Resolute, he began typing again, planning to speed up his work and finish the game quickly. Suddenly, his computer shut down and a surge of numbers appeared on the screen. Messages about designing the monster's image, finalizing plots, adding more codes, and fixing bugs popped up, surprising him. Confused by what was happening, and why his design seemed alive, he received a warning that the system was overloaded. Then, his computer case crashed down, smoke billowing out. He thought with despair that his life was over, but he noticed a strange light still glowing on his computer screen. The screen displayed an interface announcing the release of a new fantasy world. Releasing platform is on Earth. The progress bar started at 15%, jumped to 30%, and soon it reached 100%. Upon completion, bright lights emanated from his computer. He tilted his head to avoid the blinding beam and his surroundings started to shake uncontrollably. Realizing it was an earthquake, he rushed to the door, flung it open, and dashed out of the building. Once outside, he was stunned to see trees erupting from the ground, crawling up the buildings. He wondered if he was dreaming because the trees looked strangely familiar. The crowd around him was panicking, trying to make sense of what was happening. Someone pointed to the sky, exclaiming about an unidentified flying monster colliding with a helicopter. The collision caused the helicopter to explode and both it and the monster plummeted to the ground. As people shouted and fled from the falling debris, a little girl was pushed over and fell to the ground. As she opened her eyes, she saw the monster hissing at her. He was stunned to see it because it was the monster he had designed. Its name was a hippogriff, with an eagle's upper body, a horse's hindquarters, and feathers as hard as steel. Its danger level was sea level, and its special ability was the ripple scream. The hippogriff stood up and screamed angrily at the people. He ran toward it, knowing it was a bad situation. The hippogriff opened its mouth while looking at a little girl. She closed her eyes in fear. Fortunately, our protagonist grabbed her in time and dragged her away while the hippogriff started to use its ripple scream. He covered the little girl's ears, knowing that he needed to, but he felt pain when he heard the scream. Suddenly, the ground shook uncontrollably. The hippogriff stopped when it heard something running towards it. When the hippogriff looked back, it saw red shining eyes coming at it. It was another furious monster. Then, it stabbed the hippogriff before it could even react. He saw this and realized that it was the monster named Unicorn Wolf. It was the overlord of the prairie, its horn sharp and strong. Also, its danger level was B level, and its ability was Lightning Strike. He slowly closed his eyes, guessing that he wouldn't have to pay the rent anymore, then collapsed. Later, he opened his eyes when he heard a beeping sound and was surprised to see that he was in a hospital. He sat up and saw the little girl he had saved. He wondered if all those things he had just seen were real. He grabbed the remote near his bed and turned on the TV in front of him. Li Xiaomeng, the reporter, announced that currently, the height of the trees was over 5,000 meters and that they were just at the tree's waist when something flew towards them. It attacked the reporter, causing the camera to turn off. In the next news segment, the reporter informed everyone that professionals had already dived down 1,000 meters into the giant hole, and that they should see what they had discovered. The camera spotted the red glaring eyes, and it attacked the cameraman, causing the camera to turn off once again. On the next channel, the reporter told everyone that it was an emergency announcement. In response to the crisis of humans, they begged the players to report their identities at the players' lobby. He wondered why they needed players, then remembered the hippogriff, unicorn wolf, sky tree, and abyssal pit. It made him wonder why they looked exactly like the settings in the new fantasy world he was creating. Suddenly, an interface popped up in front of him. It showed our protagonist's name, Zhuang Wu, that he was at level 1, and his profession was game designer NPC. Currently, he didn't have a title, his HP was 100, MP was 0, strength was 9, agility was 11, intelligence was 12, perception was 9, undistributed was 0, and a note stated that the average human had 10 attribute points. Wu wondered if the game he designed had invaded the Earth. He clicked his inventory, but the interface showed a note that NPCs like him were unable to use the storage panel and skill panel. He tried to click the other buttons, but the interface showed a note that he was unable to use the change profession system. He was sad because he thought he was a peasant, and as a game designer, he didn't have an identity. Suddenly someone opened the door, and he immediately lay back in bed when he saw a girl. His landlord, named Ma Chun Chun, told him to stop pretending and reminded him that the TV was still playing. He awkwardly asked Ma why she was there, but Ma asked him back if he thought she wanted to come and explained that the hospital had informed her to come. Wu told Ma that he knew she treated him the best, but Ma told him that it was just because if he died, no one would pay her rent. The little girl woke up and looked at him, trying to recognize him. Then, the little girl hugged him happily, calling him dad and told him that he was finally awake. Ma angrily asked him if he already had a child, but he shouted at Ma to let him explain. Later, after explaining everything, Ma understood and told him that the little girl might have lost her memory, so she would help the little girl register her lost child status. Before the little girl's parents could pick her up, he would have to take care of her. He seized the opportunity and asked Ma if she could lower the rental fee. Ma replied, sure, and angrily grabbed the receipt. She then told him to pay her the medical fee first, which totaled 8,000 RMB. This left him stunned and shocked because of the price. After the disaster occurred, humans resorted to using nuclear bombs against the Sky Tree and the Abyssal Pit. However, they failed to triumph. Instead, they lost control of the sky and relinquished half of their territory. Now, the fate of mankind rests in the hands of the players. Half a year later, in Zhuang Wu's house, Wu observed a little girl trying to lift a shield, offering it to him joyfully while calling him dad. He patted Meng Meng's hair, reassuring her that she was a good girl. Meng Meng was a temporary name that Wu had given her. He had attempted to use this name online to locate Meng's parents. Although he received responses, they were from individuals wanting to adopt Meng or someone pretending to be an uncle, claiming that Meng's parents had perished in an accident. He resolutely asked the man for Meng's real name, but the man retorted, asking him if the little girl's name wasn't Meng Meng. He further claimed that thanks to Zhuang's report, their city had apprehended a large group of child kidnappers. 6 months had passed and Meng's memory was still fragmented, with her parents yet to come and collect her. Fortunately, Meng was a well-behaved child who often helped with chores, though she often ended up accidentally breaking things. This infuriated Ma, resulting in Wu being charged for repair fees, 1,000 RMB for the television and 3,000 RMB for house repairs. Wu had once considered sending Meng to an orphanage, but when she tearfully called him dad, he was moved to comfort her, telling her that they should go home. The new fantasy world comprised two main monster areas, the underground and the wilderness. The underground monsters were notably formidable, while the wilderness monsters were marginally weaker. Wu arrived at a prairie near S City. He placed his shovel on the ground and began to dig, not stopping until he had reached the hidden monster. The creature lunged into the air to attack him, but Wu defended himself with his shield. He then gripped his shovel tightly and struck the monster, breaking the creature's horn in the process. A notification popped up, announcing that he had killed a jackalope. However, as an NPC, he was unable to gain experience points. After completing the jackalope hunt mission, a notification appeared indicating he had slain over 10,000 horned jackalopes, earning him the title Bunny Slayer. Exhausted, he lay on the ground, relieved that his task was finally over. Being a game designer, Wu not only created plots for players, but also devised many for NPCs. Originally, the Bunny Slayer title was specifically intended for an NPC. According to the plot, an ordinary NPC, after slaying more than 10,000 jackalopes, would trigger a hidden plot and emerge as the hero of the new fantasy world. Alongside the players, they would embark on a crusade to slay the Demon King. Half a year ago, after Zhuang Wu discovered the NPC on the prairie, he endeavored to hinder him from hunting jackalopes. Regardless, the NPC continued to slaughter the creatures. Wu mocked the NPC, warning him not to blame him for the consequences of his own actions. Wu dug traps in the prairie to ensnare the NPC, used jackalopes as bait to tire him, and even lured a fang boar to the prairie. The creature attacked the NPC and flung him away. As a result, the NPC ceased to appear on the prairie. Consequently, the world's hero was on the brink of replacement. Later, in the S-City players' lobby, many players of varying levels gathered. Wu barged in, holding a dead bunny, which stunned the crowd. As he walked through the lobby, the people discussed his title, Jackalope Slayer, and criticized his cowardice for merely hunting the lowest level monsters instead of venturing into the underground dungeons. Wu was irked, not being a player but a game designer. He stopped at Lao Zhang's Spicy Rabbit Head shop. Lao Zhang, the owner, was known for his special dish, Spicy Rabbit Head. This item, once consumed, would increase a player's movement speed by 5% for 5 minutes. He informed Lao that he had acquired the jackalope he sought. However, Lao, whose business had been struggling lately, offered him some rabbit heads instead. Wu accepted the plate of rabbit heads with gratitude, oblivious to a girl observing him. The NPC, Lai Qiuya, revealed herself, and he was surprised to see her. He was elated that a key character had finally appeared. Being the game's designer, he was aware that Lai Qiu was not an ordinary NPC but one of the few gods in the game. According to the plot, after killing 10,000 jackalopes, Qiuya should consider him as determined and strong-willed, thereby blessing him to become a hero. He addressed Qiuya as a goddess and implored her to bestow her blessing quickly. However, she questioned why he had killed the rabbits, which she found adorable, leaving him confused about the apparent plot deviation. Qiuya, fuming, labeled him the Bunny Slayer. She grabbed his hand, scolded him for the mass killing of the cute creatures, and then proceeded to violently throw him to the ground. As she vented her anger by kicking him, even Lao, the owner of the Spicy Rabbit Head shop, was too frightened to intervene. Another player noticed the commotion and recognized Qiuya. They wondered whether Wu had provoked her or harassed her inappropriately. Wu, being assaulted, was perplexed, wondered shouldn't he have become the hero. Had the game altered itself during this time? Suddenly, a notification popped up. It revealed that, due to his massacre of jackalopes, he was cursed by the goddess Lai Qiuya. As a result of the curse, he was now ostracized by the world, stripped of his human identity, and transformed into a demon. The interface opened his character panel, showing his new race as demon. His current HP was 35 out of 200, MP was 100 out of 100, Strength was 13, Agility was 15, Stamina was 14, Intelligence was 12, Accuracy was 13, and he had 0 undistributed points. Wu was astounded but not entirely displeased, as the initial attributes for a demon were higher than those of a hero. He thought the ordeal might have been worth it. With tears in his eyes, Wu professed his love to Qiuya, but she dismissed him as freaking trash. He looked up and spotted something he was not supposed to say, prompting Qiuya to kick him hard, reducing his health to 30. Later, after recomposing himself, Wu realized that becoming a player unlocked previously inaccessible functions. He was pleased as it provided more convenience and spared him the burden of carrying many items during hunts. He opened the skill list and saw Demon Imitation at level 1. This skill frightened weaker demons into immobility. It had a cooldown of 60 minutes and required 20 MP. The other skill, Demon Transformation at level 1, enabled him to assume a demon form, significantly boosting all attribute points. Its duration was 30 seconds, the cooldown was 24 hours, and it required 80 MP. His new race had talents that provided extremely high agility and defense, specialized in dual-wielding weapons, and had excellent night vision. A notification revealed that demons could not change professions at the player lobby. Upon reaching level 10, he would receive a profession-changing mission. Furthermore, the system would announce his new race to the world. It asked him if he wished to hide his name. Wu clicked yes, and a notification immediately congratulated the S-City unknown player for being cursed by the goddess and obtaining a rare race identity, thereby unlocking a hidden plot. Other players also saw this and couldn't believe it. They, too, desired to be cursed by a goddess and planned to congratulate the anonymous player, unaware that Wu was the player in question and was nearby. Some even wanted to supplicate themselves to the goddess, which amused Wu. Meanwhile, in the Player Management Association's building, the person seated in the chair, President Lei Qiu of the S-City Management Association, also received the notification about the new race. He asked his secretary if anything major had occurred in their city recently. The secretary responded that their city's Thunder Dragon Guild had recently cleared a B-rank underground dungeon. Lai Bingyun, the secretary, assured Lei that her reliable sources confirmed the guild hadn't interacted with any goddess, and the Cloud Soar Guild and Blue Goat Guild hadn't recently attacked any dungeons. Lei inquired about any unusual events in the player lobby, and Bingyun mentioned a player known for hunting jackalopes had angered an NPC and suffered a severe beating. When Lei asked if it involved a kid named Zhuang Wu, Bingyun was surprised, asking if Lei was also keeping an eye on Wu. Lei explained that he happened to know Wu's father, then directed Bingyun to locate Wu when she had time. As Wu was known to be scared of dungeons, Lei suggested that she recruit him into their backup team. Bingyun affirmed that she understood. Later, in the prairie, he held 2 shovels while eyeing a jackalope burrowed in the ground. Suddenly, it sprang from its hole and charged at him. As it neared, he skillfully swung his shovel down, thumping it onto the ground. A notification popped up, indicating he'd slain the jackalope, awarding him 10 experience points. Now at level 1 with 10 out of 100 experience, he felt a wave of satisfaction at finally gaining experience. In past encounters with jackalope hordes, his only choice had been to flee. This time, however, he was eager to face them head-on. After his transformation into a demon, all his attributes had improved, making the jackalope's movements seem painfully slow. When one of the jackalopes attacked, he easily blocked it, smugly informing it that its efforts were too slow, he could anticipate its every move. He seized its ears, grinning ominously as it collapsed. The subsequent notification revealed that he'd leveled up to level 2. Gazing at the defeated jackalope, he recalled his racial abilities. Without hesitation, he activated his demon intimidation skill, shocking the jackalopes and making them faint from fear. He vanquished the prone jackalopes and added them to his inventory, simultaneously leveling up. Days passed as Wu hunted jackalopes, his level eventually reaching 6. However, as his level increased, the experience offered by these low-level monsters decreased. He concluded that hunting jackalopes had become pointless for gaining experience and decided it was time to hunt higher-level monsters. Although the original game design gave players only one undistributed attribute point per level. In this world, warriors typically boosted their strength, assassins honed their accuracy, and magicians elevated their intelligence. Wu pondered which attribute to enhance. As he looked up, a gigantic creature in the distance caught his eye, shocking him. It was the Jackalope King, a level 10 prairie wild boss with a horn as hard as steel. Known as a D-level creature, its special ability was Bouncing Crash. Staring at it as it consumed a boar, Wu felt a jolt of fear. The Jackalope King was the first boss he'd designed for new players in this fantasy world. With its high HP, resilient skin, and terrifying speed, it was a nightmare for novices. The only realistic strategy for rookies and low-level players was to use a bow to attack it from a distance. Regrettably, all he had was a shovel, leaving him regretting his initial design. Deciding on agility, Wu added his 6 undistributed points, raising it to 21. As a demon player, he was physically superior to an average novice. For the pride of a demon, he resolved to challenge the Jackalope King. However, he quickly retreated, jesting that he was kidding, and derided the jackalopes as a bunch of stupid rabbits. Enraged, the Jackalope King bellowed. Wu retorted, questioning whether it truly thought he would fight and reminding it of his numerical disadvantage. The jackalopes emerged from their burrows, chasing after him, led by the Jackalope King. The king prepared to use its Bouncing Crash to impale him with its horn. Wu sidestepped in the nick of time, narrowly avoiding a second attempt as well. He taunted the king, effortlessly evading its subsequent strikes, all while daring it to land a hit, his high agility allowing him to dodge effortlessly. Furious, the king summoned the jackalopes and ordered them to attack. Wu halted upon hearing the noise and turned back to see a horde of jackalopes led by the king hot on his trail, making him panic. In a stuttering voice, he alerted others that the wild boss, the Jackalope King, had appeared and advised them to retreat swiftly. However, instead of fleeing, the other players seemed thrilled at the opportunity to secure rare loot dropped by the king. They assured Wu that they'd join him, but rather than aiding him, they were also pursued by the Jackalope pack. The players cursed Wu, but he merely grinned, excusing himself to prepare a meal for his child. He bid them farewell, leaving them baffled by his impressive speed and swearing vengeance on him for their current predicament. A few hours later, within Ma's building, he opened his apartment door and was welcomed by a cute Meng. She rushed to hug her father excitedly. He asked her what she did at home today and Meng replied that the landlady had given her a picture book. After Zhuang Wu adopted Meng, landlady Ma Chun often visited, helping to take care of Meng. Ma also warned him sternly not to behave improperly towards Meng. As they greeted each other cheerfully, their stomachs growled with hunger. He assured Meng that he would prepare dinner. Since becoming a father, he had learned to prepare all sorts of fried rice dishes, such as egg and dried radish fried rice, ham fried rice, tomato fried rice, and more. However, when he opened the cabinet, it was bare. He checked the refrigerator and found it was empty too, leading him to realize they had run out of food. Meng saw her father's disheartened look and tugged at Wu's shirt. She cheerfully told him that she wasn't hungry. Observing her, he was reminded that Meng's diet for the past half year had been nothing but mustard with rice, white sugar with porridge, and a single loaf of bread shared between the two of them. He apologized to Meng with a heavy heart, realizing she hadn't lived a good life since he adopted her. He asked if she wanted to eat fried chicken, to which Meng excitedly replied that she did. However, her excitement faded as she remembered something and told Wu that she didn't want it after all. When Wu asked why, she explained that if they spent too much money, he wouldn't be able to pay the rent. Wu acknowledged that he still owed Ma 3 months' rent, maintenance, and medical fees, but reassured Meng that they could afford a lavish feast today, even though his balance was a mere 121 RMB. He assured Meng that from that day forward, they would bid farewell to poverty. He then ordered a set of chicken that cost 120 RMB. He knew that in the post-disaster world, the player had become everyone's idol and many people admired them. These individuals either had a strong physique or unexplainable healing abilities, but most importantly, they were all wealthy, and as long as they possessed the player identity, they could enter dungeons. He also knew that unlike wild monsters, underground monsters dropped monster crystals. One E-level monster crystal could be exchanged for 500 RMB, a D-level crystal for 1000 RMB, and a C-level monster crystal for 2000 RMB. This made him believe that becoming a player could also make him rich. Soon, someone knocked on their door to deliver their Silver Arch family meal set. Wu and Meng ate it with fervor, tears streaming down their faces. As night fell, he tucked his sleeping Meng into bed, carefully pulling a blanket over her. He heard her mumble happily in her sleep about how lovely the French fries were. Subsequently, he returned to his computer desk and checked the chat forum. He saw news that at 4 p.m. that afternoon, the Jackalope King had appeared in the city's suburbs, causing a rabbit horde. 4 players were attacked by the swarm of rabbits and hospitalized. Fortunately, they were rescued in time and their lives were no longer in danger. He was relieved that the players with him hadn't perished. If they had, he would have been plagued by guilt. The top and trending posts on the forum were all written by him. After the disaster, Wu had been doing his best to assist others in this way. To the players, Wu was akin to a god. However, there were occasional accidents, like the incident where 50 people entered the dungeon and only 2 survived. According to one survivor, the team leader had over-relied on the dungeon guide and had failed to adapt. Players asked if the God's Guide was truly helpful, but he knew that it was his worst guiding failure ever. This failure had led to the creation of multi-level dungeons and a new boss. He understood that it was all due to the system's updates and additional content in the game. In their harsh world, even if they succeeded 99 times, a single mistake could mean the end for them. After that incident, Wu gradually stopped uploading guides. The following day, he arrived at the prairie on the outskirts of S City. Aware of his current financial difficulties, he knew he needed to find a way to generate income. He loudly declared that he could forego a meal, but he couldn't bear to see Meng do the same. Surveying the boars nearby, he realized he was currently at level 6 and needed to reach level 10 by that morning. Therefore, he resolved to undertake the profession-changing mission. Venture into the underground dungeon, and gather monster crystals. He also understood that those fang boars were extremely aggressive and moved in packs. They didn't drop any crystals, making hunting them a futile endeavor, and this was why few players showed interest in them. However, unbeknownst to others, he had secretly included additional rewards in the game during its creation. Normally, hunting the same monster repeatedly would yield diminishing experience points, but after defeating 100 fang boars, a player's experience would double. With his trusty shovel, he struck a level 3 fang boar cub, understanding that reaching level 10 swiftly depended on his current hunt. A notification popped up, informing him that he had successfully killed a fang boar cub, earning him 10 experience points. Energized, he continued his hunting spree. He felt a sense of pride looking at the felled boars but was taken aback when he noticed a group of massive, angry boars behind him. He fled, apologizing to the boars in hot pursuit. But they persisted. A notification indicated that his demon imitation skill had been reset. Halting his flight, he slowly turned around, addressing the boars, indicating that it was now his turn to retaliate. Activating his demon imitation skill, he leaped towards the boars, causing them to collapse in fear. He methodically finished them off with his shovel, earning 50 experience points for each boar, helping him reach level 10 with ease and triggering the profession-changing mission. Upon accessing the game's interface, he was relieved to see that he had finally achieved level 10. Although it had taken him half an hour longer than expected, he still had ample time. His demon race profession-changing mission was to clear the Demon Wolf dungeon located on the northern side of the Sky Tree within 60 minutes. The Demon Wolf dungeon was an E-level underground dungeon, suitable for teams of 5 players who had already changed professions and had levels ranging from 10 to 20. In this new fantasy world, there were 2 types of dungeons, underground dungeons and fixed underground dungeons. Fixed underground dungeons had set locations and physical gates. The monsters within these dungeons could not escape, and once players cleared these dungeons, they would reopen. On the other hand, random underground dungeons were spatial cracks that could randomly appear in the wilderness or the city. If left uncleared for too long, the monsters could exit these dungeons and invade the earth. Moreover, these dungeons would vanish once players had cleared them. He felt the difficulty of the profession-changing mission was hellish and suspected that the system was intentionally targeting him. After humanity had unleashed nuclear weapons on the Sky Tree, it formed a circular defense shield that blocked all technological devices. If a car approached the Sky Tree, it would spontaneously combust. If a battle jet flew into the shield, it would lose its propulsion, and no signals could penetrate the shield. Thus, horse-drawn carriages were the most common mode of transportation around the Sky Tree, offered free of charge by the Management Association for players. Climbing into a carriage, he admired the picturesque prairie, reflecting that nature could thrive better without human interference. Eventually, they reached their destination, and he was elated to finally arrive at the Demon Wolf dungeon. As was the case in many MMORPG games, some players would halt their level progression to assist other players in exchange for money. These players advertised themselves as a carry team and promised to provide crystals and equipment to those willing to join them. Understanding the need to clear his mission within an hour, he contemplated enlisting some players to aid him. One player informed him they had a slot available and asked if he wished to join. When he inquired about the cost, the player responded that it was 20,000 RMB per journey, with a promotional offer of 6 rides for the price of 5. The price stunned him, and he declined. He then noticed the group he had previously seen. Their levels seemed to have increased, and they were equipped with superior gear. Suddenly, Chen Xin, level 19, approached him, causing him to panic and hastily open his inventory. He knew he had to prevent them from recognizing him. Chen Xin mentioned that their team consisted of 4 players and needed 1 more. He then asked if he would like to join them. He looked up, donning a mask, which prompted Chen Xin to ask why he was wearing it. He explained that he was a miner, a profession dedicated to mining monster crystals within dungeons, and typically did not engage in battles. Chen Xin reassured him that his profession was not an issue and he could join them. Chen Xin also mentioned that the equipment loot would be divided amongst the 4 original members, but they would distribute the crystals equally with him. Relieved they had not recognized him, he considered that their team's levels and equipment were on par with those of the carry teams. He concluded it was beneficial to ally with them and agreed to Chen Xin's proposition. Together, they opened the dungeon gate, greeted by pitch-black darkness. Since the Sky Tree inhibited all technological devices, they relied on torches for illumination instead of flashlights. Holding their torches, they ventured further into the dungeon, and he activates his demon's eyes. They notice shining crystals embedded in the ground and the walls. Kai Xiaozhang, level 18, was eager to collect the monster crystals, but Chen Xin cautioned him against it. A wolf emerged from the dark, its red eyes glaring at them with hostility. It was a level 12 armored demon wolf. Chen Xin warned his team about the armored demon wolves and instructed them to ready themselves for battle while he drew the wolves' attention. One of the wolves lunged to attack them, but they released an arrow and struck it just as Chen Xin was closing in on it. Subsequently, Chen Xin decapitated it. Another wolf pounced on Chen Xin, but luckily Qi Zhenzai unleashed her magic in time, striking the wolf before it could attack Chen Xin. Chen Xin informed his team that both demon wolves had been dispatched and advised them to restore their energy before moving forward. He then addressed Wu, warning him about the dangers ahead and suggesting that he stay behind to mine. Then Chen Xin's team proceeded to continue, leaving him thinking that even though Chen Xin's group had good equipment, it was impossible for them to clear the demon wolf dungeon within an hour. He started digging with his shovel, knowing that the boss was very close to the entrance, just right underneath him. A minute later, his shovel reached the underground. He descended using a rope, but as soon as he set foot on the ground, he was greeted by a wolf. Looking up, he was stunned to see it. The wolf leapt to attack him. Fortunately, he dodged it, but suffered 10 points of damage from its sharp claws. He looked back and saw that the wolf had crashed on the ground. He opened his inventory, aware that at times like these, he had to use it. Then he showed the wolf the dead jackalope, surprising it. The wolf's fierceness immediately changed into puppy-like behavior upon seeing the jackalope. He threw the bunny to it, knowing that the armored demon wolves, living in dungeons, had a poor diet and were irresistibly drawn towards jackalopes. He took his chance and continuously stabbed the armored wolf's belly, knowing that its weak point was the stomach. Then a notification popped up, informing him that he had killed an armored demon wolf and obtained 100 experience points. He was glad that he gained a lot of experience and could also get a crystal, so he decided he should level up there. Suddenly, he heard something approaching from behind him. Turning around, he saw a swarm of wolves heading towards him. As they were about to attack him, he immediately jumped to the rope, shouting that he forgot the jackalope's smell would attract demon wolves. He ascended the rope swiftly, bidding farewell to the wolves. Once he reached the top, he told the wolves they couldn't follow him up there, but the wolves ran away, making him wonder why they left. He peeked at where the wolves had run and saw that they were surrounding Chen Xin's group. He felt genuinely sorry for the 4 of them, but he figured since they could survive the Jackalope King's attack, demon wolves shouldn't pose much of a problem. Xiaozhang aimed his arrow and released it, stabbing a wolf in the eye. He then asked Chen Xin what was wrong with the underground dungeon and why there were so many armored demon wolves. But before Chen Xin could reply, the wolf that Xiaozhang had injured pushed him to the ground and bit his arm. Looking closer, he saw that it was in berserk mode, making him wonder why the wolves were behaving this way when they hadn't provoked them. Chen Xin swung his sword at the wolf attacking Xiaozhang while shouting at his group to focus on their duty and not to be dazed. Chen Xin called Jin Yun Kang and ordered him to heal Xiaozhang first, to which Yun Kang immediately obeyed. Chen Xin then approached Qi Zhenzai and ordered her to cast explosive fireballs at the wolves. Yun Kang wondered if they were cursed. Not long ago, they were hospitalized because of the Jackalope King and had just been discharged, but strange occurrences began to happen again in the E-level dungeon. Zhenzai cast a fireball and attacked the wolves with it, but the wolves avoided it in time and leapt towards them to attack. Zhenzai told Chen Xin that there were too many demon wolves and suggested that they should retreat. Chen Xin blocked one of the wolf attacks and shouted for his group to retreat and cover Zhenzai while she cast fireballs. But before they could retreat, they heard a loud growl, and when they looked up, they saw a huge wolf glaring at them. The other wolves surrounded them, pinning them in the center. Yun Kang fearfully told his team they were doomed, and Xiao Zhang asked his team if the huge wolf was the demon wolf leader of the second floor gatekeeper, and why it had come to the first floor. On the other hand, Wu was relaxedly digging into the ground. He was happy because the boss's room was right below him, but he stopped when he heard a loud growl from the first floor. He thought the four of them had good equipment and they should be fine, but he decided to take a look because he knew that the mission could wait, but it would be bad if Chen Xin's group died. He remembered that he had almost caused their deaths once. He quietly walked towards where the growl was coming from and saw that Chen Xin's group was surrounded by wolves. He planned to help them by luring the demon wolf leader away, thinking they should be able to deal with the remaining armored demon wolves. Suddenly, a bright red light shone from them, making him wonder what it was. Chen Xin revealed a weapon, shimmering brightly, an artifact known as the Fire Lizard's Madness Flame Dagger. This level D artifact imbues the wielder with flames. Its effects boost defense, attack, and recovery rate by 50% and last for 60 minutes, but are only available to players below level 20. Wu recognized this as a rare item dropped by the underground dungeon boss, which would usually disappear after a single use. Xiao Zhang informed Chen Xin that they had spent half a year's savings on it. Yun Kang pointed out that if others knew they'd used a D-level artifact in an E-level dungeon, they'd be mocked mercilessly. Chen Xin, however, retorted that they should wait until they had survived the ordeal to discuss it further. From a distance, Wu acknowledged that they didn't require his help. He knew that the D-level artifact could fetch at least 500,000 at the auction house, yet it was reserved for emergencies. Chen Xin's group was the first ever to employ a D-level artifact in an E-level dungeon. Checking the countdown of his mission, Wu noted there was only half an hour remaining. He needed to move swiftly. A minute later, he had finished digging the last underground passage and carefully descended. Landing in the Demon Wolf Dungeon boss room, he assessed his adversaries. The first monster, Double-Headed Wolf Thors, was a level 20 Demon Wolf Dungeon elite, known for its extreme cruelty. It was an E-level creature with a special ability known as Tear. The second creature, the boss monster named Half-Beastman Luca, was a level 25 with 2000 HP. Once a half-beastman chieftain, Luca had become corrupted and assumed the role of the Demon Wolf Dungeon boss. As a D-rank entity, his weapon of choice was a large axe. In an effort to make the exploration of this new fantasy world more exhilarating, Wu had sprinkled checkpoints and Easter eggs throughout the game. One significant Easter egg in the Demon Wolf Dungeon allowed players to reach the boss room without engaging in combat. Following the usual route, players would only reach the door of the boss room. However, Wu had dug a hole directly into the boss room to avoid waking the boss. He opened his inventory to find a roasted pig. Combining it with sleeping mushrooms, potent sleeping pills, and alcohol, he fashioned a sure sleeping medicine roasted pig. Slowly and deliberately, he approached the slumbering double-headed wolf with the doctored meal. He placed it near the wolf and hastily retreated. Awoken by Wu's movement, the wolf was taken aback by the sight of the roasted pig. One of its heads eagerly bit into the meal, causing the other head to grow angry and bite its counterpart. As the two heads bickered, Wu contemplated whether he should have brought 2 roasted pigs. Silently praying that the noisy dispute wouldn't awaken the boss, he anticipated the imminent onset of the sleeping medicine's effects. After a few tense minutes, the double-headed wolf collapsed, indicating the sure sleeping medicine roasted pig had taken effect. Wu quietly approached Half-Beastman Luca, knowing that despite its less potent physical power compared to the wolf, it maintained control through its D-level large axe and tornado dance skill. The weapon, named Half-Beastman's Large Axe, had an attack power range of 35 to 50. Its special ability was the Tornado Dance Slash, with a cooldown period of 30 minutes. This artifact, a treasured heirloom of the Beastman tribe, was meant to be owned by the Beastman chieftain. However, after becoming corrupt, Luca had stolen it and removed it from the tribe's domain. The weapon required a usage level of 25. Incredulous that he had set the requirement at level 25, Wu crept towards the axe, mumbling about wanting to punch himself. However, he froze as the boss stirred awake. Swiftly, he stashed the axe in his inventory. The boss prepares its fists, aiming for Wu, who managed to dodge. Still, the debris from the impact damaged him by 20 HP. Wary of the potent attack, Wu realized that a direct hit could have cost him half his HP. As the boss lunged again, Wu dodged and then sprinted away, pleading for a break to apply his buffs. He opened his inventory, consumed Lao Zhang's spicy rabbit head to boost his speed by 5% for 5 minutes, then activated his Bunny Slayer title skill, increasing his berserk strength by 10% for 10 minutes. Brandishing 2 shovels, he turned to face the boss, declaring the chase over. As the angry boss approached, a notification popped up, revealing only 14 minutes remained to complete the mission. Recognizing it was time for action, Wu prepared for the offensive. They were facing each other while the double-headed wolf slept peacefully on the side. The creature lunged a fist to attack him, but he blocked it deftly with the head of his shovel. Gripping his shovel tightly, he slashed at the creature, dealing 15 points of damage. He quickly realized that the damage inflicted had no effect. To defeat the monster, he would need to land 200 hits of the same magnitude. For a team, this task wouldn't be difficult. If there was a warrior who could absorb the boss's strikes and provoke it, the other members could continuously attack. But at that moment, he was alone, and he had no time to provoke the boss. The beast picked up a large stone from the ground and hurled it at him. He couldn't dodge it, the stone was too fast. It hit him, and he suffered 60 points of damage. Leaning against the wall, he was surprised that the boss had a throwing skill. It seemed that the system had modified the beast. This was not the boss he was familiar with. The creature grabbed the chain of the double-headed wolf, making him wonder why it had stopped attacking him. Suddenly, half-beastman Luca slapped the wolf repeatedly, surprising him. He opened the interface, berating the boss for its cowardice. He was fighting it alone, yet it wanted to call its teammate for help. Looking at his remaining points, he knew he couldn't let it wake the double-headed wolf. But even if he invested all his remaining points into strength, it wouldn't help much. Still, he needed to survive, so he risked it all, putting his remaining stats into agility. He thought he might currently be the most agile level 10 player. He ran towards the boss, stabbing it with his 2 shovels, dealing 18 and 20 points of damage. The beast growled furiously, attacking him with its sharp claws. He deftly rolled into the air to dodge the attack, extinguishing the torches in the process. Landing, he told the panic-stricken boss that it had been a false attack. His original plan was to extinguish the torches, for in darkness, his demon eyes gave him a significant advantage. Confused and wary, the boss felt the eyes behind it, and immediately turned to block his attack from behind. Frustrated that it could still sense his attack, he spun in the air, shouting that the fight wasn't over yet. He slashed and stabbed its neck, dealing 130 points of damage by hitting its weak point. The beast's current HP dropped to 1817 out of 2000. The creature punched back at him, but he disappeared swiftly. As it looked around, a shovel was launched at it. He stabbed at its weak point, the kneecap, slowing it down. Seizing the opportunity, he stabbed at its other weak point, the eye, reducing its eyesight. He dealt 120 points of damage. He stepped back as the beast collapsed on the ground, thinking about how effective his stealth attacks were in the dark. He ran towards the creature to continue attacking, but it reached for the chain on the ground, swinging it in a fit of anger. Unfortunately, the chain struck him in the stomach, throwing him harshly to the ground. He took 75 points of damage, leaving him with a meager 100 out of 250 HP. Painfully, he opened his inventory, cursing in anger. He grabbed his medicine just as the creature attacked again. He ran, the system warning him that the creature was adapting to the dark. He drank a mid-level healing potion, set to recover 100 HP within 10 seconds. Once his recovery was complete, he stopped running and faced the beast, ready to continue the attack. He leaped and struck its head with his shovel, then continuously hit it in the face, shoulder, hand, and chin, until its HP dropped to 650 out of 2000. Suddenly, a notification popped up in front of him, stating that the HP of the Demon Wolf Dungeon's boss, half-beastman Luca, had fallen to a third, and it was entering Berserk mode. A few seconds later, it entered Berserk mode, and a notification popped up, warning him that he was being locked on. Swiftly, it launched its fist in an attempt to punch him. He blocked the blow with his shovel, unable to dodge, but his shovel was shattered, and the fist struck him directly in the stomach. Thrown back, he slammed into the wall hard, suffering 100 points of critical damage. Though badly injured, he understood that one more hit could potentially be fatal. Suddenly, it was on top of him, poised to deliver a killing blow, but he rolled aside in the nick of time. He then stood up and ran, taunting his foe by asserting that he too could enter Berserk mode. Opening the notification, he saw that he only had 4 minutes and 30 seconds to complete the mission, and his Berserk skill would be ready in another 12 seconds. Activating his trump card, he selected his Demon Race transformation skill, as he was gradually enveloped and transformed into a demon form. His stats temporarily increased by 20%. The transformation lasted only 29 seconds, but during that time, his energy overflowed, and he believed that in his demon form, he might even be able to defeat a level 30 player alone. Beastman Luca, though in a berserk state, could still feel fear. In its eyes, Wu had become monstrous, huge, and formidable. It picked up stones and hurled them continuously, but Wu merely walked calmly towards it. When a massive stone was about to hit him, he caught it with one hand and crushed it. He then asked Beastman Luca if it was prepared for the beating that was about to come. Leaping into the air, Wu closed the distance to Beastman Luca, teasingly telling it to taste his serious punch. He then punched it hard in the face and chin. Each punch inflicted damage ranging from 130 to 170. He was aware that his state granted him immense power, but the duration was extremely short, a mere 30 seconds. If he failed to defeat Boss Luca within this time, the tables could turn again, so he couldn't afford to let his foe recover. Meanwhile, on the first floor of the Demon Wolf dungeon, Chen Xin and his group lay exhausted. Xiao Zhang expressed relief at their victory, while Zhen Zai warned that her magic wand was on the brink of breaking. Suddenly, a loud growl surprised them. Xiao Zhang panicked, asking about the sound and whether there could be more problems. However, Zhen Zai surmised it was likely a monster fight happening below them. Chen Xin instructed his team to rest and stay alert. A minute later, they proceeded to the boss room, but a notification congratulated them for clearing the Demon Wolf dungeon and eliminating the boss, Half-Beastman Luca. A puzzled Xiao Zhang asked his team how they had cleared the dungeon so effortlessly. On the other hand, in the Demon Wolf dungeon's boss room, Wu leveled up 3 times. The notification congratulated him for completing the Demon Profession Change mission. He was exhausted but relieved it was over. He then opened his inventory to check the boss drops, noticing an item called Weird Necklace of Unknown Level, Effect, and Rarity Level, but he inferred it was of high quality. He was pleased to see many magic crystals but was surprised to find a perfect quality blue crystal. He knew the ranks of crystals were divided into 3 sections: normal, pure, and perfect. The D-rank normal blue magic crystal had dim light and poor quality, while the D-rank pure blue magic crystal was brighter and of higher quality. The D-rank perfect blue magic crystal was even brighter, similar to a precious gem. Knowing its high value, he envisioned himself and Meng enjoying a lavish meal. Meng happily told him she loved her dad the most, making him really happy. He sighed at his broken shovels, realizing he needed to find a craftsman to make him a sturdy weapon. He was certain he had become accustomed to using a shovel. Holding the necklace from his inventory, he pondered why he was unable to appraise it and whether the game had added the necklace. Suddenly, he heard footsteps approaching the room where the double-headed wolf was sleeping peacefully. However, it stirred and raised its body, preparing to stand. He knew the game setting well once the stone door was pushed open. Thors, the double-headed wolf, would awaken. Frustratingly, even a surefire sleeping potion wouldn't work on Thors under these conditions. He muttered under his breath, cursing the designer who set up this system, but realized he needed to make a quick escape before the wolf noticed him. Swiftly, he leapt to a hanging rope, his exit strategy, and decided to let Chen Xin's group handle Thors as he had already eliminated the boss. Seconds later, the group opened the boss room door, puzzled to find the boss already defeated even though they hadn't yet opened the stone door. Zhen Zai remarked on the mysterious and strange nature of the dungeon, adding to their surprise. Their shock deepened as they discovered the half-beastman, Luca, dead on the ground. Xiao Zhang speculated that the double-headed wolf could have betrayed and killed the boss. Upon hearing this, the wolf, enraged, attacked them. They exclaimed that the dungeon was not only strange but also insane. Eventually, they managed to eliminate Thors, the double-headed wolf. Xiao Zhang admitted to his team that their venture into the dungeon had yielded a negative profit. They had lost an artifact, obtained only a few E-rank magic crystals and some trash items, and didn't even secure a decent weapon. Suddenly, a notification appeared before Chen Xin, indicating that their clear time for the Demon Wolf dungeon was 58 minutes and 2 seconds, breaking the previous record. The system was set to globally announce this news, and it asked them if they wished to conceal their identity. They were momentarily speechless, but Chen Xin chose not to hide their identities. The notification then inquired if they wanted to give their squad a cool name. Chen Xia suggested Flame Lizard Squad. Shortly after, a global announcement congratulated the Flame Lizard Squad, Shen Chen Xin, Kai Xiao Zhang, Qi Jin Zai, Jai Yun Kang, and Zhuang Wu for breaking the Demon Wolf Dungeon's record with a clear time of 58 minutes and 2 seconds. Each team member received the Wolf Hunter title. Upon reading the announcement, other players were impressed. Even though they knew the squad had used artifacts, they were still astounded by the short 58-minute completion time. Xiao Zhang told Chen Xin that their fame could secure them spots in some top guilds. The interface informed them that the Wolf Hunter title, which increased their attack power by 7%, was earned by clearing the Demon Wolf dungeon within an hour. They noticed Wu hydrating on the first floor and speculated that he must have scored big in the dungeon. They also spotted a few crystals on the ground. Xiao Zhang was annoyed, accusing Wu of digging for so long only to unearth so few. Wu apologized, explaining that all his shovels had broken. but Xiao Zhang still berated him. He complained about their rotten luck, dealing with an incompetent digger, and how the small number of magic crystals couldn't even cover the cost of the potions they used. Xiao Zhang reminded Wu that they had allowed him to get the title for free, so they claimed all the magic crystals and left him behind. However, Zhen Zai turned back, telling him to wait. She handed him a crystal as promised. He thanked her, asking her name and if she would be willing to exchange phone numbers. She introduced herself as Kui Zhen Zai and gave him her number. Zhen Zai advised him to leave the dungeon quickly as it was about to close, which he agreed with. Outside the dungeon, the players were puzzled as to why the squad hadn't exited yet. When the door slowly opened, a cheer erupted from the crowd. They swarmed the squad, extending guild invitations, attempting to buy dungeon clearing secrets, and offering to purchase any valuable items they might have obtained. Preferring solitude to crowded spaces, he slipped away unnoticed, leaving Chen Xin's group and the crowd at the dungeon gate behind. He found a quiet spot to stop, confident that he wouldn't be disturbed. He opened the game interface, aware that he had completed the profession change mission, which meant he could now change professions. He knew that demon warriors were known for their strength and defense, with bodies as hard as stone that few weapons could damage. Demon hunters, on the other hand, had extremely high agility and attack power, capable of converting all agility into attack power, terrifying their enemies. Lastly, demon warlocks were renowned for their powerful souls, expertise in various healing spells, and ability to summon death spirits and skeletons. A powerful demon warlock could single-handedly take on an entire army. Being a Libra, he often struggled with decision-making. He understood that a demon warrior was essentially a tank, a demon hunter was akin to an offensive assassin, and a demon warlock was more of a summoner. He wished he could select all three and wondered if that was possible. The notification informed him that he could only choose one profession unless he obtained a hero certificate, which would allow an additional profession. He suspected that securing a hero certificate would require the goddess's help, but he decided against seeking her out for the time being, as he feared her wrath upon seeing him. He opted for the Demon Hunter, believing it was the most suitable for him, as it allowed him to convert all his agility to attack power when necessary. A bright light enveloped him as the notification confirmed his change of profession to Demon Hunter, indicating that his attributes had been altered. His current level was 13, with 120 experience points out of 38 needed for the next level. He held the titles of Rabbit Hunter and Wolf Hunter. His health points were 300, mana points 150, and his strength and agility had increased by 28, physique by 14, wisdom by 12, sense by 13, with 3 undistributed attribute points remaining. He also obtained a new skill called Hunt Mark, which allowed the Demon Hunter to tag a target. Within the mark's duration, the hunter would be aware of the target's location, deal double damage to the monster, and discern its weak point upon attack. This ability could only mark one target at a time, but upon killing the marked target, the Hunt Mark skill's cooldown would reset. Failure to kill the target would trigger a 24-hour cooldown, and activating the skill required 50 mana points. He was thrilled to acquire the Hunt Mark skill, considering it exceptionally useful for solo duels. Meanwhile, at the Player Association Management Center, Bing Yun reported to Lei Q that the Goddess Martial Artist Guild was engaged in large-scale combat at the Skyline Tree's western battleground against Dark Elves. Tragically, 40 players had died, the Goddess Martial Artist went missing, and the clan's co-leader was killed. The Goddess Martial Artist Guild is a unique profession. It is a battle-oriented guild under direct military jurisdiction. They typically abstain from dungeon raids, preferring to fight monsters on the front line. When Lei Q inquired about how widespread the knowledge of this incident was, Bing Yun assured him that, to prevent chaos and panic, the information had been contained. Lei Q's concern deepened when Bing Yun informed him that the higher-ups wished for them to dispatch other player guilds to the front line to provide support. Meanwhile, on the outskirts of S-City, a man was riding in a carriage passing through the Sky Tree Shield. As they crossed the barrier, his phone began to ring incessantly. Retrieving his phone, he noticed he had regained signal and saw a series of angry messages from Ma. She criticized him for his negligence as a guardian and informed him that Meng was ill and needed to be taken to the hospital. Later, at S-City's Central Hospital, Ma was peeling an apple beside a sickly Meng, who was resting on the bed. Wu burst through the door, anxiously asking about Meng's condition. Ma, clutching the fruit knife tightly, admonished him to speak quietly as Meng had just fallen asleep. Ma questioned his whereabouts over the past 2 days, pointing out that he hadn't noticed Meng's high fever. Wu replied that he had been busy trying to earn money. Upon being asked about his success, he excitedly told Ma that he had indeed managed to earn some. He expressed his relief at finally being able to pay the rent, medical fees, water leak repairs, and the cost of the TV that Meng had damaged. Skeptically, Ma pointed out that as his landlord for many years, she had only seen him accrue losses and had never seen him make any money. Wu then produced the perfect blue crystals from his inventory and suggested that she sell them, believing it would suffice. Ma questioned if he had been to the dungeons, but Wu merely replied that he wanted to be a miner. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door. A nurse asked which of them was a family member of Meng, as Dr. Zhu had some information to share. Both Wu and Ma responded simultaneously. After a moment of speechless mutual surprise, Wu suggested that he should go. A few minutes later, he found himself in Dr. Zhu's office. The doctor solemnly advised him to brace himself before handing over Meng's diagnosis. Stunned, Wu read the diagnosis revealing high levels of magic elements in Meng's body, consistent with magic element syndrome. Once, cancer was humanity's greatest health fear. Now, in the new era, magic element syndrome had assumed that role. Ever since the game invaded Earth, the air had been composed not only of nitrogen, oxygen, and carbon dioxide, but also a new particle known as a magic element. Most people remained unaffected by the magic element, but some bodies absorbed it from the air, causing an accumulation of magic elements that had numerous negative effects. These included continuous high fever, excessive sleepiness, loss of appetite, and even the appearance of black dots. Dr. Zhu informed Wu that current medicine couldn't cure the syndrome, only protective treatment was possible. However, given Meng's body had 10 times more magic elements than the average patient, he feared even this may not be effective. Devastated, Wu sat on a bench clutching Meng's diagnosis. He understood that it was already a miracle that Meng was alive. However, he knew he couldn't surrender so easily. He decided to raid the burial ground, where there was a chance to find Lasso's Tears, an S-rank item that could cure all illnesses. Named after the goddess of light and hope from the stories, it was rumored that her tears could cure any ailment. Such a curative item could only be found in the burial ground, a place that represented death. The dungeon had a difficulty level of C, a level restriction of 10 to 30, and only a single party capacity. He understood they couldn't form a team and would have to tackle the dungeon solo. Most players wouldn't be able to clear the dungeon, but he was confident that he wasn't the weakling who could only defeat horn rabbits any longer. He returned to Meng's room, and Ma asked him with concern about the doctor's diagnosis, and if Meng was alright. He explained it was just a normal fever, but the doctor said the money for the medical fees wasn't sufficient, and thus he needed to pay more. Outraged, Ma argued that they had already paid $3,000 that morning. She questioned whether they had exhausted their funds in less than a day. Ma reassured him that if money was tight, the rental fee could wait until after Meng had recovered. As Wu broke down in tears, he acknowledged Ma's kindness. Yet Ma replied that if it weren't for Meng, she would have evicted him long ago. Chiding him, she tapped him on his back and mentioned that he was covered in dirt. She insisted he should not touch her and go clean up quickly, as she intended to take care of Meng for the night. He realized he was covered in dust and sand from digging holes in the Demon Wolf dungeon, where he had also battled the boss. Consequently, his entire body was battered and dirty. Acknowledging Ma's advice, he said he would take a bath first. However, Ma impatiently told him to leave. Later, while showering, he realized that after joining the demon race, his body had changed. He had developed a potent urge to destroy things. Despite only being level 13, his attributes exceeded those of most level 20 players. Using the Hunt Mark skill, he could solo a D-rank dungeon without worries. However, he knew soloing a C-rank dungeon would be challenging, so he needed to enhance his overall combat ability. After his contemplation, he stepped outside. S-City's Chang'an Street was a bustling business district where players bought and sold weapons. As he strolled down the street, he heard a caged monster wailing. The seller was convincing a lady that the pet they were selling was exceptionally safe. Then he pushed a button while instructing the lady to do the same. The monster got electrocuted and collapsed in its cage, severely injured. The seller assured the lady that in addition to the electric collar, they had removed all of its fangs to prevent it from biting people. Satisfied, the lady agreed to make the purchase. He knew the Earth was no longer what it used to be, yet humans remained the same. A minute later, he reached the Magic Crystal Exchange store. Looking at the exchange rate of crystals, he noticed a drop. Other players expressed frustration too, but they understood that they had no option as more and more players raided dungeons. He opened his inventory and retrieved several crystals. The employee greeted him and explained that the current price for E-rank magic crystals was 455 and D-rank was 965. He then asked if he was sure he wanted to proceed with the exchange. Pausing, he told the employee he had another magic crystal. Upon showing it, he inquired about its worth. The employee was surprised to see it and carefully examined it. He was informed it was a D-rank perfect magic crystal. Suddenly, a man behind him lamented that it was only a D-rank perfect magic crystal, good for crafting only a D-rank weapon. The man added that half a year ago, such a crystal would have been in high demand and worth more, with people clamoring to purchase it. The employee offered $10,000 for the crystal and asked his opinion. He agreed, stating it was not a problem. The employee thanked him for his business and assured him the payment would be transferred right away. After deducting the tax, a total of $133,200 was deposited into his account. Later, he visited Lao Cao's weapons store. He browsed around and noticed a Wind Frost's long sword priced at $55,000 and a water crystal dagger costing $95,000. He exited the shop, loudly criticizing it for lacking elite equipment. However, the reality was he simply couldn't afford it. While walking down the street, he spotted shining blades lying on the ground. He picked them up, recognizing them as Baldur's Curse swords. With an attack power of 1445, it was a B-rank weapon with no level restriction. It could inflict additional damage on death spirits and could absorb death souls to enhance the weapon's attack power up to a maximum of 20 stacks. A human wielding the weapon would lose 10% HP. The sword was originally the god of light Baldur's, created from a type of parasitic tree's branches found around the Divine Land. After Baldur was betrayed by the gods, his weapon became cursed. Astounded by the three effects of the sword, he asked the seller about the price. The seller quoted $15,000. He argued that the weapon was not suitable for humans and questioned if the price wasn't too high. But the seller countered, stating it was a B-rank weapon and if he didn't want it, he was free to leave. He then pulled out a large axe from his inventory and asked the seller if he would consider a trade. The seller held the large sword and noted his axe was only D-rank. However, the seller agreed to the trade, admitting he had been trying to sell the sword for several days. As he walked away, the seller laughed at his perceived victory, thinking he had made a fantastic deal. Wu knew if the seller realized he wasn't human, he might have been shocked into unconsciousness. Still, the seller believed he had made a fortune and considered the axe a good trade. Later, he arrived at the hospital and found Meng and Ma asleep. He gently covered Ma with a blanket and walked to the nurse's station. He requested the nurse to upgrade room 27 to a VIP sick room. Later, Ma woke up upon hearing her phone chime with a new message. She glanced at the screen and saw that she had received $245,400 covering all fees and 5 months rental from Zhuang Wu. Following that was Wu's message, informing her that he had settled all the outstanding bills and asking if she could look after Meng for a few days in his absence. Ma retorted, accusing Wu of lying, arguing that a typical fever and flu did not necessitate a VIP sick room. Meanwhile, in the Great Rift Valley, Wu trudged on, aware that despite being near a city skyline with trees, he couldn't drive a car to his destination. Within the territory, he still had a 30-kilometer journey ahead, but being a demon had significantly enhanced his physique, making the long walk seem trivial. Glancing at his map, he realized he was close to Darren's village. If his memory served him right, according to his prior game design, the burial ground should be concealed in the deepest part of the Mist Fog forests. Before the dungeon was opened, finding it required a mission map guiding him to the location. He also knew he could obtain this mission at Darren's village. A neutral site, this village hosted a significant number of high-ranking players and served as a critical resource supply station in the western defense area. Within the village, a man asked if anyone could hear him, asserting that those wanting the mission should present him with an attractive girl for company. One of the men, angered, unsheathed his sword, but his friends, calling him Xiao Hao, urged him to calm down. They explained that attacking an NPC could lead to blacklisting, a wanted poster, and pursuit by players' associations. Hao, frustrated, complained about the man. This drunken scoundrel had been swindling them for food and drinks daily, and he had depleted half a year's worth of his savings without the man providing any equipment in return. Suddenly, Wu appeared, exclaiming his relief at having found him. As Wu approached the man, Hao intervened, warning him about the man's deceitful tactics. The man suggested to Wu that if he desired a good mission, he should bring him attractive women for company. Wu opened his inventory while Hao continued to caution him about trusting the man. Wu thrust a risque magazine in the man's face, causing surprise and curiosity. Wu then unveiled a stack of similar magazines, questioning their appeal. The man hastily snatched them from Wu, but stated that good missions weren't distributed so freely. He was thirsty and wanted Wu to bring him some wine. Wu promptly produced a 53% Maodai liquor, assuring the man it was no issue. Hao watched in disbelief, aware that the Fly to the Sky wine Wu displayed was valued at $5,000, and he was using it merely to secure a mission. The man greedily grabbed the bottle and drank instantly. Pleased, he commented on the quality of the wine, noting Wu's sincerity, but still demanding a love letter to his neighbor Juliet before he would consider offering the mission. Struggling to control his anger, Wu set about writing the love letter. Hao, reading over Wu's shoulder, was impressed with Wu's eloquent and sweet words. However, upon delivering the letter, Wu was greeted with a punch to the face from an enraged butcher, threatening to maim them if they continued to harass his wife on behalf of the drunken man. Wu found himself infuriated, wondering who could have designed such a ludicrous mission. The drunken man, pleased with Wu's efforts, offered him a mission. An interface popped up before Wu, showing that his task was to retrieve the remains of the drunkard Ka Lin's son, Ka Shanda. The young man had gone adventuring and had never returned. It was rumored he had perished in the burial area, and Ka Lin was hoping Wu could bring his son's remains back. Wu accepted the mission, and Ka Lin presented him with a map to the burial area and a bell to use in a crisis, as the area was fraught with danger. The map marked the location of the burial area and a bloodthirsty demon tree, while the bell, named the Undead Bell, was B rank and capable of dispelling undead. It was created by Ka Lin in hopes of bringing his son's remains back home, and, upon use, it would deal a significant amount of damage to undead and death spirits and impose a silence effect lasting 10 seconds. The other players eagerly asked Wu if Ka Lin had given him a piece of equipment and if he was willing to share the mission. One player, a level 47 archer, suggested they join forces to complete the mission. Wu thanked them but insisted he could handle the mission solo and advised them to continue their activities. As he exited the house, he failed to notice several people watching him from above. One of them instructed his team that once Wu left the village, the mission and equipment would be theirs. Later, Wu dashed away on his mission, pursued by robed individuals. A child pointed at Wu and informed her uncle that Wu was the recipient of the historic rank mission. She then proceeded to tail Wu, suggesting to her uncle that they should keep watch to discern the nature of Wu's assignment. However, one of the robed men menacingly licked his blade, remarking that the girl was rather fetching, prompting her to query about their intentions. The child's uncle, Chen, promptly gripped her shoulder, explaining to the man that she was immature and imploring him not to take offense. Meanwhile, the girl protested to her uncle that the men were malicious. In response, Chen scolded her, stating that children should not interrupt adult conversations. One of the robed figures suggested they depart to avoid losing sight of Wu, and so the group departed. Chen advised his niece to steer clear of these individuals in the future, to which she inquired why he maintained a respectful demeanor despite his superior level. In response, Chen noted the difficulty of warding off poisonous snakes and elaborated that her limited time in the Great Rift Valley meant she was not privy to all its rules. The valley, he explained, is far from any city, replete with malice and peril, such as criminal activity. It boasted the highest crime rate, and it was not uncommon for inhabitants to meet their end at the hands of these metaphorical poisonous snakes, rather than actual monsters. When the girl questioned why the association failed to deal with these villains, Chen revealed that in their underground world, occasional deaths were the norm and surveillance measures like CCTV cameras were ineffective, if not impossible, to establish. How would they monitor or investigate? He queried. The girl, intimidated, acknowledged that this meant anyone targeted by these poisonous snakes was at risk. Chen agreed, cautioning her that those naive or greedy enough to undertake such missions alone usually met a grim fate. He recommended seeking the protection of a strong guild. Later, Wu arrived at the entrance of the Mist Fog Forest. He glanced back, questioning if his pursuers were these metaphorical poisonous snakes, and pondered if they were plotting an attack once he ventured into the woods. Despite the forest's daunting fog barrier obscuring visibility, he proceeded inward. A man loaded an arrow into his bow, releasing it towards Wu, who narrowly evaded the projectile. He promptly sought cover behind a tree, anticipating the approach of the attackers. He observed 4 figures. One of the men teased the archer about his poor aim, prompting him to activate his snake cane, assuring his companion he would reduce Wu to dust. A fire snake materialized from the cane, hurtling towards Wu and demolishing the tree in its wake. Wu narrowly escaped, pondering how they had discovered his hiding spot. As Wu fled, the archer mocked the cane wielder for also missing his target, asserting that he had no grounds to criticize his archery skills. While Wu was running, Wu abruptly halted, sensing impending danger due to his demon's instincts. Activating his demon's eye, he spotted a man above, ready to strike. The assailant lunged, only to be met with Wu's sword. As they struggled, the attacker surmised that Wu must be an assassin, given his ability to detect stealth. A man named Zhang ordered the group to continue their onslaught and prevent Wu's escape. The archer then sent a volley of arrows skyward. Wu retreated from his adversary, sensing a new threat. He looked up to see the incoming barrage and, with swift precision, deflected the nearest projectiles. He understood their strategy: long-range attacks to halt his movement, stealthy ambushes, and widespread damage. However, he was struck by a couple of arrows, losing 20 and 23 HP respectively. He fled, consulting his map and recognizing the well-coordinated tactics of his foes, indicative of their long-term partnership. Yet, he couldn't help but smile confidently. His run was brought to a halt by a large tree blocking his path. One man taunted Wu, remarking on his halted escape. Wu retorted that if they hadn't pursued him, there would be no need for escape. The archer, incensed, aimed an arrow at Wu, declaring his impending demise. However, Wu calmly dodged the attack, causing the arrow to strike the tree. Unexpectedly, the tree stirred, its roots writhing. It was the wild boss, the bloodthirsty demon tree, roused by the arrow's impact. The guardian of the Mist Fog Forest was level 42, B rank, with special skills in puncture and bloodthirst. As the roots ascended, the archer's bravado melted into terror. He turned to their leader, Jang, pleading for rescue as the boss seemed to have locked onto him. The archerman shouted in panic as the threat approached him. One of the men asked Jang how they could possibly defeat it, given that it was at level 42. Jang responded, noting they seemed to have fallen into Wu's trap. As the enemy was about to attack the archerman, the man implored Jang to rescue him swiftly. The cane-wielding man activated his snake cane, but inadvertently hit the archerman instead. Injured by the boss, the man queried his companions about their treacherous actions. They explained that the boss's aggression had been drawn by him. Thus, after his demise, the boss's attention would be redirected to the closest person. The man was consumed by the boss, morphing into a skeletal form in an instant. Meanwhile, his companion reassured him that this was the intended strategy. They wouldn't have to confront the boss directly. Subsequently, the venomous snakes attempted to flee while Wu observed them. Wu anticipated that those snakes would turn against their own kind when their lives were in danger. As they ran off, one of the men pointed out something strange to Jang. The cane-wielding man explained that the boss's attention didn't shift to the kid, but instead focused on him. The boss's roots ruptured the ground in pursuit of them. Subsequently, the roots emerged and encircled the group. Launching an attack, the roots targeted the cane-wielding man. In a state of panic, he begged Jang to devise a quick solution to save him. Just as the cane-wielding man was about to be attacked, the assassin activated his stealth ability and mockingly informed the cane wielder of his departure. However, the roots turned and impaled the assassin instead, absorbing his blood and reducing him to a skeletal form. With shaky attempts to stand, the cane-wielding man proclaimed their impending doom. Jang observed that the boss didn't target Xiao Wu or the cane-wielding man initially, but instead attacked Xiao Zhang, the escaping assassin. This led Jang to deduce that the boss's attack patterns weren't necessarily linked to aggression. He theorized that the boss might be using waves to sense its targets, suggesting that if they remain still, they won't be attacked by the bosses. Jang also noticed that Wu hadn't been attacked by the boss, speculating that this was because Wu hadn't moved at all. He surmised that Wu must have understood the boss's attack style and settings. Xiao's panicked cries brought Jang back to the present. As Xiao ran away, the root pursued him, primed to strike from behind. Jang warned Xiao that if he ceased movement, the boss wouldn't attack him. Upon hearing this, Xiao stopped running, and the root also halted. Jang directed Xiao to employ his flame snake against Wu, who was positioned at the center of the boss. Xiao activated his cane snake while shouting a death wish towards Wu. However, Wu deftly dodged behind a tree. Seeing this, Xiao, in a panic, pointed his fire upward, knowing he couldn't risk hitting the boss. Xiao's attack exploded mid-air, and he queried Jang on why the boss didn't attack Wu despite his movements. However, Jang confessed that he was unsure. Wu realized that in a brief span of time, they had understood the bloodthirsty demon tree's attack style and settings. Furthermore, he acknowledged the venomous snake's strength and cunning. If they targeted their prey, escape would be impossible. However, Wu knew that hesitation had no place when facing venomous snakes. He then reached into his inventory and drew his bow and arrow, aiming them at Xiao. As Xiao activated his burst fireball to counter the incoming arrows, Jang warned him that Wu was baiting his attack. His fireball struck the boss, sending Xiao into a shock and panic. Swiftly, the roots impaled Xiao. Wu took aim once again, this time targeting Jang. Jang deflected the arrows with his sword, shifting into berserker mode while challenging Wu's arrogance. Determinedly, Jang charged towards Wu, promising to demonstrate the chasm between their abilities. Jang knew that the boss might have an area it didn't attack. Otherwise, he couldn't explain why the boss didn't attack Wu. Jang severed the roots, warning Wu not to assume safety simply because he hid behind the boss. Wu relaxed. Jang, that bastard, is so powerful, he thought, witnessing Jang fighting toe-to-toe against the boss. Wu knew that a berserker could enter berserk mode, an effect lasting for 5 minutes, granting the player an additional buff of all attributes, increased by 50%. Jang, breaking the ground beneath him, leaped towards Wu, shouting threats of impending doom. Wu was aware that the bloodthirsty demon tree might be a wild boss, but it was far from weak, proving stronger than some C-rank dungeon bosses. Wu then wondered where Jang's confidence to kill him came from while facing such a formidable boss. Suddenly, he realized it must be an artifact. Jang was holding an artifact named Flame Dragon's Roar. It was a D-level artifact. Its effect stated that the Flame Dragon's Roar, unsealed from a crystal ball, dealt large-scale area damage and had explosive power. Jang lifted the Flame Dragon's Roar into the air, shouting for Wu to meet his end. It made Wu realize that Jang was recklessly daring because he was holding a dangerous artifact. Then, Jang released the Flame Dragon's Roar, causing a large explosion. Meanwhile, in Darren's village, the locals saw the large explosion emanating from the Mist Fog Forest. They knew that it was at least a C-rank artifact that could be bought for a few $1,000,000. At the entrance to the Mist Fog Forest, Chen and a child were covering their faces to avoid the fallout from the explosion. The child asked his uncle if the person would die. She tried to run to check on him, but Chen grabbed her hand, asserting that they could only go so far. Chen led her away, warning that it was too dangerous ahead, and if they ventured any further, they would get caught up in the blast. On the other hand, the bloodthirsty demon tree was ablaze, and Zhang lay on the ground. Wu took a sip of water, commenting that if he hadn't run quickly, he would have perished there. He knew that the power of the artifact was far more terrifying than the boss was, and that luckily, Zhang, like a poisonous snake, chose to leave his companions to die rather than using the artifact from the start, which would have put him in danger. He approached Zhang and noted that the poison snake was rather wealthy, seeing the multitude of magic crystals Zhang had. Suddenly, Zhang's hand moved, and he attacked immediately. Fortunately, Wu jumped back in time to avoid it. Zhang questioned how he'd been discovered, but Wu retorted, teasingly asking if Zhang thought he was stupid. He explained that when a player dies, their dropped items are neatly arranged, not scattered haphazardly. He accused Zhang of throwing his items out as bait, thinking Wu would be blinded by greed, and then planning to attack him while he was distracted by the items. Zhang laughed, commending Wu for being perceptive, even suggesting that Wu was more of a poison snake than them. However, Wu knew that he was the game designer. When asked how he survived the explosion, Zhang revealed that he was on the verge of death, so there was no harm in sharing. He explained that he had a unique piece of equipment that allowed him to use two artifacts simultaneously, the Flame Dragon Roar and the Flame Dragon Protection. The latter cost more than $1 billion, intended for use against the goddess martial artist, but unexpectedly, it was wasted on Wu. Then Zhang questioned why the boss hadn't attacked Wu, as he couldn't understand. Wu drew his sword, responding that the boss didn't attack him because they were the same, both from the demon race. Zhang laughed heartily, thinking it was a joke, and told Wu to stop lying. But then, Zhang's expression shifted, and he told Wu that it was easier to find answers from his corpse. Wu smirked and activated his hunt mark. The hunt mark showed him where he could critically strike Zhang, revealing that Zhang was barely holding on and had sustained grave damage from the earlier explosion. Zhang wondered what was happening, why he felt like a target, and if the kid was stronger than him. However, he dismissed the notion, thinking it impossible because Wu wasn't even level 20. Wu began his transformation, leaped towards Zhang, and attacked him in demon form, wanting to end it swiftly. Zhang was taken aback, but Wu slashed at him with his sword. Zhang questioned who Wu was. He then fell to his knees, admitting that he recognized Wu was the same as the goddess martial artist, both no longer human. With one last look at Wu, Zhang called him a demon. A notification popped up indicating that he had eliminated a high-level player, earning him 19,000 experience points, raising him to level 17. Furthermore, he completed the hunting mission, which awarded him 1 hunt value point, leaving his hunt value point level at 1, with 1 out of 100. Killing a player had awarded him so much experience, leading him to wonder why he hadn't heard this from other players. Could it be because he was a demon? He also noticed that the hunt mark skill seemed upgradable, prompting him to ponder whether dark elves would also level up if they killed players. He opened his inventory, knowing that those 4 individuals had dropped numerous items, and then he spotted a sword. As he grasped it, it vibrated continuously. Its name was Vibrator Metal Longsword with an attack power of 6575. Being a B-rank weapon, its special feature was vibration. This long sword was crafted from vibrating rock. When equipped, the weapon vibrated intensely, increasing its destructive power, making it easier to deal higher damage to monsters and destroy enemies' weapons and equipment. However, its use was restricted to players at level 35 or above. He pondered that only characters with berserker or similar professions could use it effectively. Then, he picked up Wu Tu's transformation ring. This was a rank item with a special feature that allowed the player to equip 2 artifacts simultaneously. This miniature ring was the life's masterpiece of Wu Tu, the elves race's genius artifact researcher. Wu knew it only dropped in B rank or higher dungeons, and currently, only some big guilds could clear such dungeons. He wondered how Zhang had obtained such a precious item. Later, people started moving towards the site of the explosion. The Green Goat Guild's 9th Attack Force squad arrived, and their leader informed them that the people had been attacked by a wild boss. One of the team members reported that they had found 4 players' corpses, but the leader was shocked to see Zhang lying on the ground. He asked, "Why him?" The man asked if the leader knew Zhang, to which he replied, "He is Zhang, his little brother." One of the team members had heard the guild leader's younger brother disliked participating in dungeon raids but had become a poison snake. He took advantage of the guild leader's identity, and the association's members could do nothing about it. The guild leader had given Zhang several rare pieces of equipment, so it was inconceivable that Zhang couldn't defeat some wild boss. One of the men reported that all items from their inventory had been looted. The leader recognized that those 3 corpses were indeed slain by a wild boss, but Zhang's chest wound seemed to have been inflicted by a sharp weapon. He instructed his team to notify the guild's members and begin searching for any suspicious individuals nearby. Meanwhile, Wu arrived at the burial dungeon. It was a C-rank difficulty challenge open to a single contender. He pushed the gate open and stepped into the first floor, named the Corpse's Corridor. Suddenly, a voice called him an invader and warned him he would pay a hefty price for his rash actions. Skeletons along the corridor animated and formed a level 27 skeleton warrior, a level 26 skeleton spearman, and a level 28 skeleton archer. Wu knew this differed from his original design, as the first floor shouldn't have contained such high-level skeletons. He realized that the system had tampered with his game data and codes again. As the warrior skeleton lifted its weapon to attack, Wu blocked it with his sword. Still, his foot cracked the ground due to the warrior's force, and he struggled to keep his balance, wondering why a mere skeleton could possess such strength. While he was occupied with the warrior skeleton, the spearman skeleton lunged at him from the side. Wu spotted it just in time and jumped mid-air to evade the strike. The archer skeleton took aim while he was airborne. Understanding that fighting in such a confined space was to his disadvantage, Wu noticed the archer skeleton release an arrow towards him. Luckily, he managed to block it in time, but the powerful force still sent him crashing against the wall. He marked the archer skeleton, knowing that tougher challenges awaited him, but he couldn't afford to back down. His plan was to deal with the archer first, so he sprinted past the other skeletons to reach it. He decapitated the archer skeleton and struck its weak point, dealing 360 damage. His weapon's special effect added an additional 430 damage. He gained 300 XP and increased his hunt value by 1 point. Additionally, a notification informed him that his Baldur's Curse sword had absorbed the skeleton archer's soul. His soul power was now 1 out of 20, and each stack of soul power granted the user an additional 1% power, along with 2% Death Spirit's magic resistance. He acknowledged that his sword's special effect dealt more damage than a regular weak point attack. However, his low level meant his overall damage was not high. He decided to level up quickly and mark the spearman skeleton's head. He leapt towards it, launching an attack with a smile. Moments later, he had vanquished the skeletons and realized that once he understood their attack patterns, they were easy to defeat. However, the pile of skeleton bones began to move again. He turned around instinctively, sensing something was amiss, and saw skeletons hiding on the side attempting to resurrect the defeated skeletons. Leaping towards them, he took them by surprise and attacked. Within a minute, the skeletons were pinned to the wall. He realized these skeletons were magicians who summoned skeleton soldiers. He ordered them to quickly summon more skeleton soldiers for him to grind levels. Grinning eerily, he asked them if they had heard his command. Afterward, he hurled the skull of a skeleton towards its companions, amassing a significant amount of experience points as he persistently overcame the skeletal warriors. A notification revealed his advancement to level 20, his mark skill had leveled up. His ability to identify weak points had increased by 10%, and he was now able to mark 2 targets simultaneously. Inspecting his status window, he speculated that, with the enhancements of the demon race attribute and the unique attribute changes of a demon hunter, his foundational attributes had already surpassed those of an average level 30 player. Thus, he was confident that he could match Zhang in combat. To his surprise, the skeletal mages took their own lives in desperation. The fact that skeletons were capable of suicide astounded him. He sighed, realizing he could no longer grind for experience, and proceeded towards another gate, ready to advance to the next floor. Pushing the gate open, he was met by bones strewn across the floor. He discovered the remains of Ka Shando on the ground. Suddenly, the torches flared to life, and he was taken aback to recognize his location. Floor 2, the Death Plaza. Before him stood armored knights of levels 37 and 38, as well as a skeleton lord of unknown level. The gate behind him slammed shut, causing him to tremble in fear. Wasn't the final boss supposed to be on floor 3? Frustrated, he realized the system hadn't merely altered the underground dungeon monsters, it had also changed the map's inhabitants. He understood it was no longer the dungeon he had designed. One of the knights lifted its sword to strike him. He parried the blow, but was forced to deflect the sword, knowing he couldn't withstand the assault for long. He drew his sword and slashed at the knight, only to find that the armored figure remained unscathed. This unexpected invulnerability to damage shocked him. He triggered his hunt mark, but a notification warned him the target had no weak points. This realization, that his foe had no vulnerabilities, left him astounded. He then noted the knights were clad in the elf tribe's netherweave armor. When one of the knights lunged at him, he attempted to fend off the assault with his sword. He He quickly recognized the attack's overwhelming strength, realizing it was leagues beyond the skeletons he had just vanquished. Unable to repel the strike, he was hurled back, the impact to his abdomen making him cough up blood. Looking at the skeletal enemies, he mused on the fate of the drunkard's son who had met his end there. The knight advanced towards him, halting just in front of him. He considered the likelihood of meeting his demise in this very dungeon. As he contemplated the inherent risks and dangers a player faced in dungeons, essentially staking their life, the knight launched a relentless attack. Collapsed on the ground, he felt his heart cease to beat. He was so fatigued he couldn't summon the strength to stand, leaving him to wonder if this was the end. He envisioned Ma and Meng Meng, offering them a silent apology. A notification alerted him to his heart's failure and the consequent activation of his demon's secondary heart. Thus, the demon heart activates. He was lying on the ground, and the knights were looking at him. One of the knights raised his sword to deliver a fatal blow, but he opened his eyes and immediately stood up before the sword could strike him. He punched the knight in the stomach, taunting them for their sluggishness. The knight tumbled into the others, shattering parts of their faces. The interface informed him that when the demon heart beats, the player receives a 50% bonus to all attributes. Simultaneously, the player will not feel fear. His strength increased to 72, agility to 53, physique to 21, wisdom to 19, and sense to 20. He felt lighter, stronger, and confident that the demon heart's buff would allow him to combat the berserker knights. One of the knights lunged to attack him, but he leaped in time to evade, then slammed the knight's face into the ground. He was puzzled when the knight didn't move. Grabbing its head confirmed its elimination, leading him to question why he hadn't gained any experience points. He then realized the armored knights had no vulnerabilities, and Baldur's cursed sword wasn't effective against them because they weren't death spirits but the boss's puppets. Opening his inventory, he understood that upon stepping inside, he was already engaged with the boss. He drew his vibro-metal longsword, lunged at the knight, and cleaved it in half. Looking at the fallen knights, he felt fearless, confident that his current self could easily dispatch a bunch of skeletons. He decapitated one skeleton, pierced another's chest, and shattered the remnants with a powerful stomp. A few minutes later, he finally defeated the knight's skeletons and confronted the skeleton boss. He looked up at the boss and was taken aback to find it standing, its gaze upon him. The pressure was palpable. It unsheathed its sword and swung it through the air towards him. Although the strike didn't hit him, he understood the vast power gap between him and the skeleton boss. Stunned, he wondered if this was still a C-rank dungeon. He knew the boss had deliberately skewed its attack. If it had aimed accurately, he would be dead. Even with the demon heart and undead bell, his instincts cautioned him against combating this skeletal boss. The boss questioned if he was still human. The inquiry shocked him back to reality. He remembered the goddess's curse, and after defeating Zhang, he could gain experience. He replied affirmatively, he was no longer human. The boss announced that if he wasn't human, it wouldn't need to kill him. Surprised, he mainly wondered about the boss's intentions. The boss told him it could sense a familiar presence on him and instructed him to open his inventory. As he released various items from his inventory, he questioned if any were what the boss referred to. He showed the boss a risque magazine, which the boss seemed to appreciate momentarily before maintaining composure. It repeated its earlier statement that it sensed something from his body. He revealed a necklace, asking if that was what it meant. The boss was taken aback, exclaiming that after 100 years, it had finally found it. The item's name was Skyline Tree's Key, a legendary level artifact. It was a sacred object the elf tribe had been protecting for many generations. Utilizing the key would allow one to control the Skyline Tree, activate an absolute barrier, enable the tree to blossom and bear fruit. Upon maturation, the fruits would explode upon contact with the ground, causing extensive damage. He was taken aback by the SSS rank item. He thought there was a major bug because an underground dungeon dropped a legendary item. He questioned if he should risk his life to reclaim it, but knew he couldn't defeat that monster. Suddenly, an interface appeared, congratulating him for activating the main mission, Elf Prince Osith's request. The Skyline Tree was under siege by malevolent energy, facing an unprecedented crisis. It beseeched him to deliver the Skyline Tree key to Elf King Nuo, enabling him to prevent the impending disaster. He questioned if the skeletal boss was the Elf Prince and considered it a plausible explanation for the knight's elf armor. For now, though, his priority was reclaiming the key. Accepting the request, he planned to contemplate further actions later. In Skyline City, at the Royal Palace on Harvest Day, a sacred day for the elf tribe was unfolding. The elf prince, Osith, was reveling with others, unaware that within the royal relic chambers, an intruder was inspecting their treasures. This intruder had stolen the key to the Skyline Tree. With the loss of the key, the protective barrier of the skyline tree vanished, initiating a war between the Dark Elves and the Forest Elves. The elves blamed Osset's negligence for this disaster, so they stripped him of his title and banished him from the skyline tree. Osset, now ousted, embarked on a journey to retrieve the skyline tree's key. Unfortunately, he fell into an ambush within the Mist Forest, a fatal encounter for everyone involved. Osset's soul was then controlled by an evil entity. When he opened his eyes, he found himself transformed into the Lord of the Burial Dungeon, a prisoner in his own realm. 20 years prior, a human arrived. Osset did not wish to kill him, yet the malevolent energy inside forced his hand. Wu, realizing why Osset had previously questioned him about his humanity, was puzzled by the existence of this evil energy, as he had not incorporated such a concept into his game design. Wu informed Osset of his mission to save someone and asked for Lasso's tears. Osset revealed that he did indeed possess a bottle of the tears once, but due to his prolonged captivity and boredom, he had consumed it. Frustrated by this news, Wu realized he stood no chance against Osset but proposed the idea of making a soup from him. Osset, presenting a ring, calmed Wu and explained that Lasso's tears were not the only means of saving someone. He went on to share that Lasso's tears could have side effects, and the ring, named the Root Ring, might prove more helpful. The Root Ring, crafted from the roots of the skyline tree by the Forest Elves, imbued its wearer with immunity from all diseases. Upon hearing this, Wu was taken aback, while Osset simply remarked that the ring was quite valuable. Overwhelmed with joy, Wu told Osset that the ring was not only valuable but superior to Lasso's tears. Osset agreed to give Wu the ring, but in exchange, he asked Wu to perform a task. He wanted Wu to use the undead bell to free the souls trapped with him in the burial dungeon, victims of the same fate because of their loyalty to Osset. Wu cautioned Osset that using the undead bell could make the spirits disappear forever. Osset, however, simply smiled and accepted the potential outcome, acknowledging that they had already experienced death once. Wu was torn. The bell was a valuable artifact, and using it here seemed wasteful. However, not using it meant he could not acquire the ring to save Meng Meng. Wu activated the ring, and it emitted a brilliant light that enveloped the spirits. As the light faded, so did the spirits, with one bidding farewell to his prince. Osset bid goodbye to his brother Dean, and the souls who had remained loyal to Osset found their release from the burial dungeon. Wu queried Osset about his continued existence despite being a spirit, to which Osset responded that his strength prevented the undead bell from eliminating him. Wu pondered the implications, realizing that if Osset didn't die, he wouldn't be able to exit the dungeon. However, Osset simply stated he could open a transport gate, and with a flick of his fingers, he did just that. Osset handed Wu a letter to be given to his father if they were ever to cross paths. Wu stepped onto the transport gate, slowly fading from view, leaving Osset alone. Once alone, Osset revealed a book he had been hiding and started flipping excitedly through the pages of a risque magazine, lamenting that he couldn't go out to see the world's beautiful women who seemed more attractive than the palace's elf girls. Then, Osset remembered he had forgotten to tell Wu one crucial detail: the transport gate was randomized, and even he didn't know where Wu would end up. After the goddess martial artist went missing, Dark Elves breached the first line of war and launched an attack on the humans. It was the most ferocious assault in all of history. A huge eagle attacked a man who shouted desperately for his captain to save him. Fortunately, the captain arrived in time and repelled the eagle with a swift elbow, causing it to slam hard onto the ground. Despite his fear, the captain, Lai Zhangyun from the 2nd Defensive Team of the Goddess Martial Artist Guild, stood firm to protect his comrade. He extended his hand to the man, Zhang Hao, asking if he was alright. Accepting Lai's hand, Hao informed him of the deaths of Lu Xing and Zhang Zi. He expressed his despair, believing there was no point in fighting a war where their enemies hid in the shadows, controlling monsters as their pawns. Hao concluded they stood no chance of winning. In response, Lai emphasized their duty to defend humanity's first line of defense until their leader returned. Hao, with tears in his eyes, reminded Lai that their leader had already been missing for over a month, and his fear was mounting. He expressed his belief that they would all perish if their leader did not return. Suddenly, a solitary red petal drifted down, followed by a shower of similar petals. Lai, puzzled by this phenomenon, looked upwards to see they originated from the skyline tree. When one of the Dark Elves sounded a trumpet, their forces began to retreat, leaving the human soldiers bewildered. An excited Hao informed Lai that the elves were retreating and they had survived. Yet, Lai could not understand why the elves would withdraw when they were clearly at an advantage. The tree's flowers bore fruit, which started to crack and fall to the ground. One of these fruits rolled toward Hao, who curiously picked it up. Recognizing the danger, Lai warned Hao to drop it, but not before it began to glow red. Just in time, Hao threw it away before it detonated, creating a large crater. Witnessing this, Hao was stunned. Panic set in as the remaining fruits also began to explode, leading Hao to scream in anger and confusion, blaming the elves. Meanwhile, in the deceased country, a transport gate materialized and Wu cautiously emerged. Surprised by his surroundings, he observed mist and enormous tree roots, as well as large structures hanging from the roots. Struck by this sight, he pondered if he was at the deepest floor of the skyline tree or if this was the elf tribe's resting place. Then, it hit him, he was in the highest difficulty dungeon. Wu was in the deceased country, a dungeon of a rank difficulty with a party capacity of 20. He cursed the skeleton, Osset, for sending him to such a place. He focused on the hanging structure and, to his surprise, something began to break free from it. As the entity fell from its enclosure, Wu found himself staring at a level 51 Death Elf warrior. The creature slowly crawled toward him, its hand taking form. As it morphed its hand into a sharp weapon, it swiftly stood up and charged at him. He managed to block its attack. Trembling, he acknowledged the vast level gap between them. Activating his hunt mark, he invoked his title as Wolf Hunter, boosting his attack power by 7%. Panicked, he attacked the creature, realizing that it was a dead body without a weak point. Then he noticed the red line on its back. As the creature was about to bite him, he realized that to defeat it, he must sever all of those lines. With a forward swing of his sword, he forced the creature back, then leaped behind it and cut the red line on its back. The creature collapsed, lifeless, and he gained 12-0 experience. Surprised by the considerable amount of experience he earned, he understood that pinpointing a weak spot was key to an easy kill. As he excitedly checked his newly acquired experience, he abruptly stopped, remembering something crucial. The dungeon of the deceased country was difficult to clear due to a time limit. Being a place for the dead to rest, it forbade living humans from disturbing it. If he didn't clear it quickly, he would become one of the dead. Suddenly, he heard the objects hanging from the roots stirring. Turning around, he noticed them breaking. Aware that he could barely handle one, he knew he was in trouble if they all attacked together. As the Death Elves emerged, he sprinted away, frantically questioning how he could win, and implored Osset to quickly extract him. Meanwhile, Osset was engrossed in a magazine, appreciating the attractive bodies depicted within. Suddenly, he sneezed and wondered if skeletons could sneeze. Later, the Death Elves lay defeated, and Wu was exhausted from battle. Suddenly, he felt his hand start to move on its own, attacking him. He panicked, realizing his hand was no longer under his control. He knew that if the virus spread throughout his body, he would lose control entirely and become trapped. Worse, he wouldn't be able to leave. Then he remembered the ring Osset had given him. Suppressing his rogue hand, he deduced that the tree, being made from the roots of the skyline tree, should resist the virus. He slipped the ring onto his possessed hand, and the virus vanished. Looking at his hand in frustration, he wondered if the foolish skeleton prince had purposefully sent him here. But his misfortune continued. The objects hanging on the tree stirred again, and more Death Elves emerged to attack him. In desperation, he activated his demonic form and was about to counterattack when a strong pink light struck the elves. Surprised, he watched as the elves turned to ashes and faded away. Staring at the potent light, he wondered about its origin. Then, a figure appeared behind the light, and he was stunned to see the female martial goddess emerge. He was relieved to be saved, but he was curious about her appearance when she should have been on the front line. The goddess assumed a fighting stance against him. Shocked, he raised his hands in the air, puzzled about why she was preparing to attack him. He realized his situation was dire in his demonic form. He would be perceived as an enemy by the goddess. He could have handled the earlier undead, but being targeted by the goddess was akin to facing death itself. The goddess remained vigilant, observing him, but she eventually lowered her sword. She wondered why she felt a sense of familiarity with this demon, and why it felt as though she had known Wu for a long time. Meanwhile, in the Player Management Association building, Bing Yun reported to Lei that yesterday's explosion had caused many players from the association to suffer severe injuries. At the first front line in Burning Land, the Goddess Martial Artist Guild had suffered 166 deaths, and 280 members had lost their will to fight. The Lightning Dragon Guild had lost 5 members and 102 had lost their will to fight. The Green Sheep Guild reported 30 deaths and 72 members who'd lost their will to fight. Lastly, the Yun Teng Guild had 13 deaths and 51 members who'd lost the will to fight. In addition, the front line had been seized and surviving players had retreated to Darren Village in the Great Rift Valley. Bing Yun informed Lei that if the skyline tree continued to explode, in 2 days, the explosion would reach Darren's village. Half a month later, it would extend to S City. Then, 1 month later, everything within 500 meters of the skyline tree would become a burning hell. Panicked, Lei tapped his fingers on the table and asked Bing Yun about the higher-ups' arrangements. Bing Yun replied that they were instructed to do everything possible to halt the explosion. If they failed, everyone would need to evacuate from S City. Lei stood and asked Bing Yun if there was any news about the goddess martial artist. Bing Yun replied that there currently wasn't any. Lei walked away, instructing Bing Yun to inform all players of their plan to attack the skyline tree for the last time tomorrow. They wouldn't wait for the goddess. Meanwhile, in the deceased country, the goddess sniffed Wu, making him wonder if she was considering eating him. She asked if he had anything to eat, revealing that she hadn't eaten in over half a month. His transformation skill ended, causing his demon form to slowly fade away. The goddess asked why he was turning into a human now. He replied, unsure of how to explain, that he had originally been a human but after being cursed by the goddess, he became a demon. He asked if she believed him. The goddess sniffed him again and stated that her nose was very sensitive. According to her, he hadn't originally been a human. He shyly pushed her back, questioning if she had lost her wits due to hunger. He wondered how she could believe he wasn't human. Reaching into his inventory, he pulled out a piece of bread, intending to offer it to her. The goddess quickly devoured it, leaving Wu dismayed and wondering why she hadn't left any for him. Observing her, he decided she was somewhat naive and wondered how she became a goddess martial artist. Suddenly, the goddess confessed that she also wasn't clear about it. Half a year ago, after the game had invaded Earth, she had become the goddess martial artist. This revelation shocked Wu. Covering his mouth, Wu realized he hadn't spoken aloud and was perplexed as to how she knew his thoughts. The goddess advised him not to overthink. She had a special passive skill that allowed her to read the thoughts of those within a 5-meter radius. Although he had criticized her earlier, she felt he didn't harbor ill intentions. Wu quickly stepped back to a safer distance. He couldn't let her discover that he was the game designer. It would certainly mean his death. The goddess grabbed her shield and asked Wu if he knew how to leave the place. She revealed that she had been fighting dead elves for over a month. But no matter what she did, physical attacks, burning, burying, even magic, they wouldn't die. Realizing she didn't seem to apply much strategic thought, Wu mused that if he had her combat ability, he would have cleared the dungeon long ago. He explained that they were in the deceased country and their enemies weren't living humans, hence why they couldn't die. To leave the deceased country, they had to defeat the boss. She asked if he knew where the boss was located. She'd been there over a month without encountering him even once. Wu pointed upward, suggesting that the boss should be at the highest point. Immediately, she prepared to ascend. Wu attempted to stop her, asking her to let him finish speaking. But she jumped, spear pointed in attack. Unfortunately, she crashed back to the ground. Despite being injured, she sat up and confessed that she couldn't defeat the boss. Wu explained that the deceased country was in a rank difficulty dungeon, the hardest to clear, and even as a goddess martial artist, she wouldn't be able to win alone. Suddenly, something landed heavily on the ground, shattering it in the process. Wu slowly turned and saw a large elf behind him, Nodo Orod. It was a level 90 monster with 235,400,000 HP, 10,000 MP, S-rank status, and it wielded the Arda twin sword. The previous Elf King had been corrupted by evil energy and had become the guardian of the deceased country. Surprised to see a level 90 boss, Wu realized that with the Elf Saint sword, the goddess martial artist couldn't win. He wondered why the Elf King had become the deceased country's boss and feared to look at it, wondering why someone had altered his previously good game settings to such disastrous ones. The king raised its hand, causing Wu and the goddess to become alert. However, it simply pointed at Wu and accused him of being a thief. Confused, Wu pointed at himself just as an interface popped up, asking him if he wanted to hand the Skyline Tree's key to Elf King Nodo Orod. Displaying the Skyline Tree's key, Wu asked Orod if he was looking for it. Orod took it, asking him where he'd found that necklace. Wu replied that Orod's son, Osset, had asked him to deliver it. He then handed over a letter, explaining that besides the necklace, Osset had also entrusted him with it. Later, in the scorched front line, a transport gate materialized. Wu and the goddess emerged from it. He was startled to see the Skyline Tree in bloom, wondering what had transpired when he had the key and questioning why the tree bloomed. The goddess examined Lai, who was sprawled on the ground. She attempted to heal him, but the interface informed her that Lai's health was critically low, making a healing spell ineffective. Lai, relieved that she had returned, informed her that his end was near, and she should conserve her energy. He implored her to assist Captain Thunder Armadillo and the others at the Skyline Tree. Wu alerted the goddess that they needed to hurry. Without the key, he explained, no number of players could destroy the Skyline Tree. She took his hand and hoisted him up, urging him to hang on tight because she was about to start running. Initially puzzled, he understood when his soul seemed to depart his body as the goddess dashed forward. Meanwhile, in the Skyline Tree's royal court, the players watched the shield in trepidation, behind which the malevolent dark elves were grinning. Lei, or Thunder Armadillo, had been a typical mercenary until the game invaded Earth. Once bestowed with the lightning god's power, he leveraged it to dominate other associations, ascending as the leader of S-City's player association. Lei struck the shield with his lightning dragon fist, but only managed to cause a minor crack. Yun Teng clan's leader, Zhang Kai, attacked the shield with his weapon next. In a fit of rage, Jiang admonished the Dark Elves for their cowardice, berating them for hiding behind a barrier they couldn't breach. The Dark Elf King, Nodo Luca, level 80 in S rank, wielded an Ice Blizzard sword. As the younger sibling of Elf King Nodo Orod, Luca embraced the evil energy, fell from grace, and became a Dark Elf. Mocking the humans, Luca explained that without the Skyline Tree's key, they were powerless to break the barrier and could merely watch the Skyline Trees obliterate the world. Jiang provocatively challenged Luca to face him in a fair fight. But Luca dismissively replied that a lowly human was unworthy of his attention. Incensed, Jiang cursed at Luca but was then startled by a sudden presence behind him. The goddess, carrying a dizzy Wu, halted her run. The other players, relieved at her arrival, questioned the identity of the weakling she was supporting. Recognizing him, one player identified him as Wu, the rabbit hunter, to the surprise of the others. They surmised that the goddess must have encountered Wu en route and rescued him. Lei remarked on Wu's fortitude and wondered when he had acquainted himself with the goddess. Wu resolved not to let the goddess carry him in the future, feeling he had been rattled nearly to death. Jiang warmly greeted the goddess, urging her to use her spear and shatter the barrier. Luca questioned how she managed to escape from the deceased country, believing it impossible that she could have defeated the Elf King. Then, Luca noticed something, the Skyline Tree's key hanging around Wu's neck. Wu drew his sword, triggering murmurs among the crowd, speculating that he was only there to cause trouble. They wondered if the rabbit hunter had lost his mind to challenge a barrier even Thunderlay couldn't break. Seeing the key, Luca barked orders to the Dark Elves to halt Wu. However, before they could advance, the other players roared in anger, swearing to annihilate the cowardly elves to avenge their fallen comrades. They defended Wu and attacked the Dark Elves approaching him. A minute later, Wu arrived at the royal court in the Saint Relic Hall. He placed the necklace back in its original case, prompting the interface to materialize before him. It confirmed his identity and notified him that the Skyline Tree was in active mode, querying whether he wished to deactivate it. Without hesitation, he selected yes, only to be warned that forcibly stopping the active Skyline Tree would result in its total destruction. The interface asked again if he wanted to proceed with this risky course of action, and yet again, he emphatically chose yes. The Skyline Tree shone brightly in the city's streets, its glimmering presence leaving people in wonder about the origins of its petals. A mother and her daughter were particularly enchanted by this spectacle. The daughter, awed by the beauty of the petals, told her mother about her desire to make a wreath from them as a gift for her father. Her father was Lai Zhangyun, the leader of the second offensive team. Ma, who had been caring for Meng Meng, looked out the window with a worried expression. It had been 2 weeks since Wu left, and she wondered if he was safe. The flowers of the Skyline Tree were in full bloom, but as they lost their petals, the tree was rendered bare, yet it remained resplendent. Meanwhile, Jiang, Lei, and the goddess watched Luca closely. The goddess, wielding her spear, attempted to penetrate Luca's shield. Lei, using his lightning dragon fist, also attacked. But Luca arrogantly dismissed their efforts, saying that even with the inherited power of the Thunder God, Lei remained human, incapable of fully utilizing the deity's power. To Luca's surprise, however, Lei succeeded in shattering the shield. Fear gripped Luca as he felt his powers diminishing and wondered why Wu had control over the Skyline Tree. His shield faded gradually, leaving him shouting in disbelief about how it could happen. The goddess seized the opportunity to strike Luca with her spear, yet he remained in denial about his predicament. The tree's branches began to crack and tumble to the ground, causing widespread astonishment among the players. The ground also started to fracture and collapse. In response, the players called for an immediate retreat. An announcement was made that the Skyline Tree had fallen and that the humans had won this round. In the aftermath, at the players' graveyard in S-City, people congregated to honor the players who had sacrificed their lives for the safety of humankind. The leaders, the goddess, and others laid beautiful flowers at the graves of the fallen heroes. The families left behind by these brave individuals were, however, consumed by grief and loss. On this tragic day, 2,032 brave and courageous heroes lost their lives in the Skyline Tree disaster. They will always be remembered for their valiant fight for humanity. Later, at the hospital, a nurse was stunned to see Meng awake and looking out at the twinkling lights. The nurse urgently called the director, informing him that the VIP patient in room 2 had awakened from her magic element syndrome. Later, Wu arrived and Meng told Wu that she was hungry. Wu, in his excitement, promised to buy her a hamburger and fried chicken. But Ma, furious, questioned his parental judgment and scolded him for intending to feed freshly recovered Meng greasy, unhealthy fast food. Suddenly, a knock on the door paused mid-action as the goddess was startled to learn that Wu had a child. She let out a sigh of sadness, but moments later, a blue light radiated from her body, matching a similar light from Meng's forehead. A lady emerged from Meng's body. Ma questioned Wu about what he had done to Meng, but the mysterious lady attacked Ma, causing her to collapse. The lady then commanded the goddess to enter the room. As she did, she revealed herself to Wu, leaving him stunned. The lady admitted to losing her godly powers during her previous visit, but she hadn't expected to find them within the goddess. Wu inquired if she was the goddess martial artist. The lady conceded that she was, in some respects, but without her godly powers, she didn't count as a god. When Wu asked if she had come to reclaim her powers, she remained silent. Instead, she leaned in and whispered to Wu that the game had resumed. If he wished to survive, he needed to win at all costs. Afterwards, she kissed him on the cheek and vanished, leaving Meng and the goddess to regain their senses. Meng asked about the beautiful woman beside him, making the goddess blush in surprise and wonder about her sudden presence there. Meanwhile, in the inland's deeper areas, a monster emerged from underground and took flight while roaring. A notification popped up, announcing the unlocking of the player's level. The player's highest level was now level 90. Meanwhile, deep within a dungeon, a man wondered where all the monsters and the boss had gone. He told his team that he couldn't see any monsters at all. Yun Kang informed Chen Xin that he had heard from the player forum that the skyline tree had collapsed not too long ago, and the dungeon no longer spawned monsters. Chen Xin, who had applied for a player loan last month and had spent over $1 million on new equipment, was worried about how he would repay his debt if they couldn't fight any monsters. In S City, Chang'a Street, also known as the Player Business Street, players were unemployed and selling their equipment at significantly reduced prices. A huge explosion rocked the city and robbers looted shops. Yet, people merely watched the chaos unfold. A man asked his friend how many robberies had occurred that month. His friend expressed concern that if the association didn't find a way to control the players soon, S City would turn into a haven for criminals. In the player association's building, a clan leader level meeting was taking place. The goddess felt embarrassed. The last time she regained consciousness, she had been in Wu's sick ward. She glanced at Wu, wondering if he might think she had feelings for him, and how she could strike up a conversation. The Green Sheep Guild leader, Zhang Yunhan, voiced his concerns about the deteriorating state of the association and how allowing any random person to join the meeting was disrespectful. Jiang Kai retorted, reminding Yunhan that without Wu's help during the Skyline Tree battle, they would have perished. Yet, Yunhan continued to display arrogance. A woman pointed out to Jiang that if his statement was accurate, then the city was indeed saved by a low-level player. She introduced herself as Xiao Qi'er, the leader of the Chamber of Commerce, to Wu. Qi'er told Wu that she could offer him diamond rank membership benefits if he needed to purchase anything in the future. Grateful, Wu thanked her. Jiang questioned why Qi'er offered Wu a diamond rank when they had worked so hard and only received a gold rank in return. Qi'er responded with a playful question, asking if she wasn't allowed to like Wu. The goddess pounded the table with her hand, informing Qi'er that Wu already had a daughter. However, Qi'er had done her research. She knew that Wu's daughter was adopted during a disaster, and as far as she was aware, Wu was single. Qi'er teased the goddess about her interest in Wu's personal life. Angrily, a man slammed his hand on the table, and Yunhan voiced his displeasure, calling Wu a trash who relied on women. However, both goddess and Qi'er shot him a warning glare, telling him to be quiet. Wu regretted attending the meeting. 2 days earlier, Wu had opened his door to Lei, who handed him an invitation to the meeting. Lei mentioned that attendees could enjoy the association's best treatment and a monthly allowance of $50,000. Elated by the prospect of this income, Wu looked forward to not having to compete for monsters anymore. In Greenland, players were in heated discussions over killing a jackalope. Life had become harder for the players after the collapse of the Skyline Tree. The value of weapons had plummeted, and monsters were increasingly hard to find. At the meeting, Lei sat down while telling everyone that since they were complete, they should start the meeting. Bing Yun played a video that showcased numerous flying monsters and extraordinarily large creatures attacking players. Qi'er recognized the location in the video as the country's Deep Abyss pit hole. Bing Yun confirmed her guess, explaining that the pit was spawning high-level monsters, much like the Skyline Tree once did, and it had become the main battlefield. Players from different regions were already heading there to provide support. Impatient, Jiang urged them to join the fight, expressing concern about the survival of his guild. Yunhan criticized the association's slow response, revealing that an overseas player had reached H City a month ago. This statement angered Bing Yun, who glared at Yunhan, with Jiang stuck in between the two. Jiang realized that Yunhan was intentionally causing trouble. 1 month ago, in the command department of H County's Abyss Pit Hole, Qiu Yunzhen, the leader of H Country's Player Association, informed everyone that they had already lost 3 cities. Currently, Z Country's player level is the highest. He then asked why no one was requesting their help. Jin Shanglian, H country's minister and disaster officer, replied that it was precisely because Z country's player level was the highest, and they had the best equipment, that they hadn't invited them over. The Abyss Pit Hole's equipment and rewards would undoubtedly be taken by them. He added that they could invite them over, but they would have to share the loot from the Skyline Tree raid. Smith, the acting person in charge of M Country's Player Association, assured them that their association would handle the Deep Abyss, their country's ferocious tiger, and the White Bear Guild was on its way to provide support. Shiro Yusuke, our country association's leader, confirmed that their country's Dark Ninja Guild and White Ghost Guild would arrive the day after tomorrow to provide support. The man from H country expressed gratitude for their assistance and assured them that they would be compensated as requested after this ordeal. However, Yunjin scolded them, stating they were treating the citizens like a joke, and they would regret not inviting Z country to help. Shanglian reminded Yunjin not to forget his identity, mentioning that he himself had given Yunjin his title as clan leader and could remove it at any time if he wanted to. This statement surprised Yunjin, who promptly left the meeting room. Meanwhile, in S City's Player Association building, Bing Yun revealed that their side had negotiated with H County more than 3 times. The opposite side believed they had successfully raided the Skyline, obtaining a significant number of loots and items. They demanded that half of the acquired items be handed over before they would be allowed onto their island. Jiang was furious to hear this, arguing that the items had been obtained at the cost of their comrades' lives. He challenged Lei, questioning why they had been summoned if not to be informed about this situation, and whether there was any way to handle it. Lei calmly assured him that the meeting wasn't over and there was no need to rush. He then asked Bing Yun to get straight to the point. Bing Yun invited them to view some videos. In these videos, the Deep Abyss Black Dragon Kabata was seen destroying the city. People were hopelessly running for their lives, losing their loved ones, and being left alone on the streets. Players were hastily escaping. Monsters relentlessly attacked the citizens, and players who were supposed to fight were hiding in fear. One of the leaders was surprised, comparing the Black Dragon to a mobile raid weapon. Jiang asked Bing Yun when the event took place. Bing Yun revealed that the video was sent by H country the previous day. According to the latest reports, the second eruption of the Deep Abyss Pit Hole was a disaster exceeding the Skyline Tree's disaster level. This second eruption had caused the destruction of 3 cities, the elimination of 8 top-tier guilds, over 6,000 players had lost the will to fight, and more than 350,000 citizens had died. After a moment of silence, Lei broke the silence and announced that the war's aftermath was still very present, with each association having suffered heavy damage. The higher-ups didn't plan on sending them into this chaotic situation. However, if the current pace continued, within less than 3 months, H City would entirely collapse, impacting their country's periphery. Lei explained that he had summoned everyone to introduce a special guest and called for the guard to let him in. The person who entered was the H Country Player Association's leader, Qi Yuanzhen. Jiang accused Yunjin of only coming to request their help after being significantly defeated, but Lei intervened. He explained that Yunjin had been eager to request their support for the past month and had been in regular contact with them. Lei announced to everyone that the higher-ups had decided to support H country. The Goddess Martial Group had reached an agreement and was preparing an expeditionary army to help H country. Applications could be made through the association. Yunjin bowed and begged them to save his country. The room fell silent again. Lei asked Jiang why he was silent now when he had been the most vocal earlier. Jiang confessed that while he wanted to help, after watching the video, he didn't want his comrades to sacrifice their lives needlessly. Yunjin tearfully pleaded with them to save his country. Yunhan pushed back his chair and questioned Yunjin about his actions during the disaster before storming out. He announced his indifference towards Yunjin's country and declared the meeting pointless before leaving. Tyr also excused herself, warning the goddess to be careful, as if something happened to her, Wu would be hers. Later, on the highway, Yunhan asked the man about the situation and whether there were any leads. The man handed him a paper, revealing he had found clues and had identified the player most likely responsible for Brother Zhang's death. Yunhan was surprised to recognize the person, causing the man to ask if he knew the person in the picture. Yunhan confirmed that he had attended a meeting with him. The man revealed that during his investigation, he had uncovered something very intriguing. The man reported to Yunhan that the person was called Zhuang Wu and 3 months ago, Wu was still a novice. He obtained a unique title. People called him the Rabbit Hunter because he was so afraid of dying that he only hunted horned rabbits for half a year. What a coincidence it was that after that system notification, the Rabbit Hunter no longer hunted horned rabbits, and even more interesting was that he was a part of that team. What was even more unbelievable was that Wu only spent 2 days to complete the Drunkard's Chain mission, and obtained the historical rank mission. Zhang Tianyi started to go after the Rabbit Hunter because of that mission. But by the time he arrived, Zhang Tianyi had already died. Yunhan asked the man if he was certain that Wu killed his little brother. The man replied that once could be an accident, twice a coincidence, but the third time or more meant it was inevitable. Then he told Yunhan that he suspected that Wu was connected to the raid god. If they could get in touch with the raid god through Wu, within half a year their Green Lamb Guild could become S-City's strongest guild, perhaps even the strongest in the world. He then warned Yunhan about the potential trouble with Wu being friends with the martial goddess. Yunhan replied that if they could turn Wu into an obedient dog, there would be no trouble. The man asked Yunhan if he planned to use the artifact. Yunhan responded that Wu was someone who killed his little brother, so he couldn't let him die easily. He found it too pitiful, and he must make Wu feel that it was worse than death and make Wu beg for his own end. Meanwhile, Wu was in his apartment in front of his computer. He thought that according to past game design, the black dragon would protect the dragon egg and not leave the deep abyss, but that destructive power far exceeded his design. After the Skyline Tree's ammeter, he realized that it wasn't the same game that he had designed. Then he noticed someone on the dragon's head and wondered what it was. He activated his hunt mark and noticed that it was someone, possibly stronger than the black dragon, using it as a mount. He remembered the lady telling him that the game had already continued and if he wanted to survive, he must win all the way. While watching the video, he was pondering about the god's game. He remembered the King of Elves thanking him for setting him free. He looked at his paper, wondering if it was the game he had designed, if the game had invaded Earth, or if such a world had always existed. Holding his head, he wondered if an original world existed. How would he know, and what was the evil energy that could control the Elf King? Meng handed him a cup of hot tea, which she had brewed for him. He was patting Meng, telling her that she was a good girl, when suddenly, he saw what Meng saw outside their window. The interface warned him that a large amount of energy was approaching. He immediately grabbed Meng and jumped out of his apartment. They landed safely, but Meng was dizzy from the sudden jump. Yunhan said he knew Wu wouldn't die so easily. Wu asked Yunhan if he knew what he was doing and if he wasn't scared that the association would find him trouble. Yunhan laughed and asked when he had ever been scared of the association. And when he had an objective, no one could stop him. Then Yunhan asked him if he had killed his little brother. Wu brandished a long sword and teasingly asked Yunhan if he was referring to the owner of that sword. Yunhan furiously told him he was going to die. Then Yunhan lunged at him to attack. Wu activated his hunt mark, then he saw critical positions that he could hit. He blocked Yunhan's attack using the long sword. Yunhan told him, thinking that he was going to become his god. He felt excited. But then, Yunhan's sword broke in half, leaving him stunned. The man told Yunhan to be careful because there was something strange about Wu. Yunhan told Wu that he had many weapons, so they should see how long he could last. Then Yunhan revealed another weapon and immediately attacked him. Wu teasingly told Yunhan that compared to the martial goddess, his attacks were too weak. This made Yunhan furious, and he attacked him again, accusing him of seeking death. The man warned Yunhan that Wu had many secrets, so he shouldn't kill him. On the other hand, the martial goddess saw a strong power in the distance and she thought that it seemed to be coming from Zhuang Wu's house. Meanwhile, in the office, Bing Yun reported to Lei that Yunhan had just attacked Zhuang Wu. Lei furiously replied that the Green Lamb Guild should be destroyed, as it was of no use anymore. Well guys, that's the end of the video. Also subscribe to the channel, hit the bell and like the video. Thank you for watching and see you next time again.